Okay, well, colleagues, Happy New Year. This is our first meeting of 2026, so it's our meeting held in public. And welcome to all of those who are watching from home as well, or at a more convenient time for them. We're going to be live streaming today, assuming the technology works for us, because we have had some challenges. So hopefully that's all going to work today. So, I'm just going to remind myself that I need to speak into the microphone, which is yeah. Okay, I think that's working. So yeah, just a reminder, colleagues, to lean into the microphone when you're speaking so that we can all hear when you are making comments or asking questions. So I just want to put on record our thanks to Jude Adams, who obviously left our organisation last year, and we had opportunities to say goodbye and thank you to Jude. But I just want to put that on record. Jude was obviously with us for a very long time, made a significant contribution to the trust, and we wish her very well in her new role and thank her for all of her contributions. And we did have Leah. I think she's just popped out dealing with supporting somebody outside on the corridor, so she'll be joining us shortly. But Leah Adams is our new interim Chief Operating Officer, so we've got Leah in her new role, although she's been to our board meetings many times before. So we're scheduled to finish at 1:15. We've got lots to get through the agenda, so hopefully colleagues can assume that we have read the reports and we can just deal with questions and comments as we go through. We'll have a break at 10:50 and then resume again at 11, if that's okay. So we are due a fire alarm test as usual on a Wednesday morning. It should only be a few minutes. If it's any longer than that, then obviously we'll follow the appropriate colleagues to the assembly and release. Okay, that's all the admin for the meeting. So we are really pleased to welcome today colleagues from our North Care charity. We've got colleagues Amy, Emma and Catherine who are here to talk to us about the fantastic work of the charity, and I'm sure we'll all have some questions and comments. So I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name's Amy and I'm Interim Head of Fundraising at North Care Charity, and it's so lovely to be here today, so thank you for inviting us. Raising the profile of North Care Charity and the incredible work that the charity does to improve care for patients and families and our colleagues, it's not just about visibility, it's absolutely integral to everything that we do. The amazing impact that you're going to hear from Emma today is the foundation of everything that we do. It's what drives engagement, inspires support, and enables us to continue growing our reach and our ambitions for our patients and their families. It's just integral to everything we do. So thank you so much for today.
I will be using my notes, everybody, so please. So yeah, good morning, and once again, thank you for inviting us today for us to be able to share the impact that North Care is making across the NCA. For anyone who's not familiar with North Care, we support Bury, Alden, Rochdale and Salford hospitals and community services by funding things that go over and above what the NHS can provide. We invest in 4 key areas: innovative equipment, education, research and wellbeing. And thanks to our community's generosity, we're able to help our colleagues deliver the best possible care. So today we'll bring that impact to life by sharing some examples that really show the heart of what we do, focusing first on wellbeing and how we brought a little bit of magic across the NCA this Christmas. So first of all, a huge thank you to everyone who supported our fundraising. Together we raised thousands of pounds and received an overwhelming amount of donations. It was incredible. It was this incredible support that made everything I'm about to share possible. So as you can see on the screen here, Christmas, as everyone knows, can be one of the hardest times for patients in hospital. Patients are missing family moments, traditions and comfort of home. Because of our supporters, we made sure every patient woke up to a meaningful gift. From a child delighted with a new toy to an adult worn by festive socks, and to patients receiving a toiletry set, helping them feel fresh, cared for and a little bit more themselves during their day. We also received an amazing array of donations, everything from text to gifts, with one of our corporate partners donating iPads to the children. And it wasn't just the gift, it wasn't just the magic of gifts. Local school children came in and sang carols, bringing a bit of cheer and lifting spirits on what can be one of the hardest days of the year. A local group even wrote and released a Christmas single with proceeds funding toys and gifts from our patients, which you would have heard if there was some sound. It was going to play the Christmas song. And as well, local football teams visited the wards, bringing smiles, laughter and plenty of festive cheer. And maybe the most magical moment of all was a visit to Father Christmas himself. Our supporters really made the day feel special, creating magical moments that lifted spirits when patients needed it most. Next slide, please.
A project that we decided because it was a bit of a waste of a room, and we had feedback from parents to say that there's no quiet space for children to go when they came for appointments. So we decided to convert this room into a sensory space, and with the help through North Care Charity, Enterprise Cars, Rochdale Round Table and our parent fundraiser Kelsey. But yes, this is the official opening.
So this was an example of how we've created better environment for children in our community. Thanks to the incredible corporate support, parent fundraising and North Care's commitment, we transformed a room at Callaghan House in Haywood into a dedicated sensory space for children who are neurodiverse or have sensory needs. This wasn't just a nice to have. The sensory room helped reduce anxiety and support emotional regulation during appointments. By creating a calming environment, it has made clinical visits less stressful and more positive for children and their families. And when children feel calm and supported, they can engage fully in their care, which means better participation, improved outcomes and happier families. This project really reflects our commitment to compassionate, inclusive care that respects every patient's needs. So from festive gifts to calming spaces, wellbeing is at the heart of what we do. But we also fund equipment that changes lives. Everything we achieve starts with the incredible support we receive from community fundraising events, individual donations and partnerships with local businesses. Together these efforts allow us to invest in equipment and projects that transform patient care. A great example of this is here at Salford Royal, where recent fundraising has helped us provide a senior trainer Tego, a specialist device that supports stroke patients in rebuilding strength, mobility and independence through assisted movement, even while seated. It's especially valuable for patients with limited movement after a stroke, offering a safe and empowering way to stay active, boost recovery and support overall well-being. And just as we're improving rehabilitation for stroke patients, we're also creating comfort for those facing cancer treatment. Chemotherapy can mean long, exhausting hours in the chair. For many patients, those hours are some of the hardest they'll ever face. That's why comfort matters. A successful external grant has enabled North Care to fund new electric reclining chairs and side tables for the chemotherapy unit at Royal Oldham Hospital, transforming the chemotherapy experience by bringing comfort, relief and dignity to patients during long and challenging treatments. These chairs make a huge difference. Patients and colleagues have told us how much easier it is to use an electric reclining chair compared to the manual ones, and how the side tables work perfectly in the compact treatment areas, giving patients a way to keep personal items close at hand. This is more than just about furniture, it's about helping people feel cared for and respected during one of the toughest times in their lives. Comfort during treatment is just one of the ways that we care, but support also comes in the form of education. We provide health education for patients and their families, helping them feel informed and supported. And we also help staff become leaders in their fields through specialist training, development and guidance. Here's an example of how this commitment to education is making a real difference. So thanks to funding from North Care Charity, we funded a dedicated education and support day for patients considering epilepsy surgery. The goal was simple: help people feel more informed, reassured and connected. The event brought together patients and carers, expert speakers including doctors, nurses and specialists, and former patients who had shared their own experience of surgery. It wasn't just about facts, it was about honest conversations, easing fears and building confidence. Epilepsy surgery can feel daunting. Hearing from people who've been through it and having experts on hand to answer questions made a huge difference. People commented that, "I don't feel scared about the surgery anymore. This helped me decide I would have taken months longer without today. It shows how much the staff care." Longer term, this approach helps patients feel more confident in making decisions about their care, builds peer support networks and shapes better services by listening directly to patient feedback. This is just one example of how charitable investment in education is changing lives. We see how charitable support makes education possible, helping patients feel informed and staff become leaders in their field. Beyond education, charitable support also helps us improve environments for children and young people receiving treatment on the Children's Unit at Royal London Hospital. Thanks to donations, fundraising challenges, grants, individual giving and incredible colleague fundraising efforts, we've been able to create spaces that bring comfort and a sense of calm during what can be very difficult times. And here are some examples. Charitable Funds has helped create a dedicated infant feeding room, which you can see in the bottom right corner. A warm, tranquil environment where families can feed their children in comfort, regardless of age or feeding preferences. It includes facilities for preparing feeds, sterilising equipment, giving families convenience and peace of mind. And also, thanks to a donation from the Oldham League of Friends, work is well underway on a new adolescent room, which is the top right-hand corner. This space has been designed collaboratively with the young people who will use it most, ensuring it reflects their needs and preferences. And currently in design phase is the Sunshine Room, which will provide a comforting home-from-home environment for children and young people with complex needs and, sadly, those facing end of life. Every detail is being carefully considered. Attract toys for full accessibility, a specialised wet room, sensory light features including sound and tactile elements have all been included. Alongside these major projects, donations have also funded smaller improvements that make a big difference, like iPads for learning and instruction, cot blankets for warmth and comfort, and an outdoor projector that brings colourful visual effects to brighten the outdoor spaces. Every gift, every challenge, every fundraiser, big or small, helps us create these moments of comfort and joy for children, young people and their families. And beyond improving indoor spaces, charitable support has also helped us transform our outdoor environments, turning grey, unused areas into vibrant green spaces. Thanks to charitable investment, we've reclaimed areas of derelict land across our sites and created areas full of greenery, biodiversity and opportunities for outdoor health and well-being. Here are some examples of these transformations. At Fairfield Hospital, as part of the rewilding project, we've revitalised outdoor spaces that were previously neglected. And at Oldham, we've transformed the ICU garden into a calming, therapeutic space for patients, families and colleagues. These projects aren't just about aesthetics. They're about creating environments that support recovery, reduce stress and promote well-being for everyone who uses our hospitals. And now I'm delighted to hand over to Catherine, who will share more about the difference charitable funds have made, not just to the physical environment, but to the health and well-being of our hospitals and wider community of Fairfield.
Thanks, Emma. So Rewilding Fairfield started as we were at a networking event in Bury, senior leaders networking event, and we happened upon Blowers tractors for free post-it notes at the Great Manchester event. Ironically, we're giving out. So made a beeline for their stand and got chatting about Bury as a conurbation and the green space, neglected green space in Bury. And I happened to mention to them that Fairfield Hospital is quite a green site for somewhere that's in an urban environment. So they came out to visit us and were really surprised at how much green space we have and invited us to apply for the grant. We brought Emma into the fold because Emma was integral in writing the grant for application for us. And then they introduced us to the NHS, who took us under the wing because they were so excited by the amount of green space that we had and the potential. Previously, we have a very neglected green spaces at Fairfield, but also expensively neglected green spaces. We mowed every inch of grass known to man, and had a rat problem. Still do have a bit of a rat problem because it's near a river, but and taking this on has really transformed the way that we see our site at Fairfield, and built relationships with the local schools, with the local neighbours. Our next door neighbour Gerald, who is one of our really good friends of Fairfield, is a gentleman in his 80s. He's absolutely thrilled at the change that we've seen to the Fairfield site. And our nursery now has a education garden, we've got a bog garden, and we've got a sensory peace garden, as well as a nature walk, and we're just about to put some signs up so that people can get the steps up our walking site. We've transformed 9,000 square metres of green space, planted 20,000 bulbs, created 8 bespoke seating areas. We've had 8 community planting events. We've started a gardening club in the spring. We've planted 330 perennials, 190 trees, countless hedges, and we've done that all in our people's free time with volunteers. And the site is unbelievably different. But the thing that the legacy that we feel that this project leaves behind is the sense of community across the site, the sense of ownership of Fairfield. And the children of the nursery have had forest school sessions that we got for free. Those children are the children of the people who work at Fairfield Hospital. And we're hearing back from them how the children talk about their forest school, how much they enjoy it. There's a few people in the finance department who've got kids in that nursery who hear from their children. So it's a huge project that we're incredibly proud of, but it grew arms and legs to the degree where the RHS took us on for 2 years, gave us free gardening advice. And the RHS now are the friends of the Northern Care Alliance. So they have taken Oldham on now and secured a £300,000 grant. So it's really a project that's becoming a movement in and of itself. And we're also very proud that we've won a number of awards, one of which is, if anybody knows about Britain in Blue, we got level 4 Britain in Blue, which we're reliably told is very hard to get first time round. We also got National HFMA Award, and we were shortlisted out of 700 nominations for the Manchester Health and Care Champion Award. And all of that's brought more publicity and more willing participants. And like I said, it's now a movement that's grown arms and legs. Fundamentally, it would never have happened if it wasn't for the North Care charity. And the corporate sponsors that came and helped us on the day, we wouldn't have got 20,000 bulbs in the ground without them. And they came because of the North Care's networks. And for us in Fairfield, really, we've really learned how invaluable, and we already thought North Care were invaluable, but how invaluable North Care are as a charity and that value add. And as finance director, I'm fully aware, as Suzanne knows, the financial constraints that we have. And we don't have the money to do the nice to have thing, but actually, this is becoming it's a CIP on our lawn. So you know, it's absolutely fundamental to what makes us, you know, Northern Care Alliance. And for years to come now, we'll be able to walk through the Fairfield site and see the impacts, and you know, and how proud we are of the impact. And I have to say how proud I am of the North Care team and of Emma, and the work they put in, heart and soul they put into what they do, and it's unbelievable. I think you should fund a new clicker for you.
Yeah, it's been great, obviously, working with Catherine and the team over at Fairfield. And I think it just shows sort of the impact. And also, I was on a webinar not so long ago with NHS Charities Together where we talked about the benefits of outdoor based in health, and unbeknownst to the person that was presenting, that I was on the presentation, she used Fairfield as an example. So that is being shared across sort of the NHS charities network, and it's almost like a blueprint of what can be achieved. Next slide, please. So we hope we've shown today sort of some of the areas in terms of how we're making an impact. And again, that's only possible through the support we receive as a charity from our communities, from our corporate partners, and from external trusts and foundations. So on that note, I wouldn't be working for a charity if I didn't do a bit of a call to action, a bit of a plug. So obviously we can only continue doing what we do by the support of our community. So if anybody is interested in taking on a challenge for 2026, we have lots of events coming up from skydives, Manchester Marathon. So yeah, if you would like to join us and become Team North Care, all the details you can just find them on our website. We'll just speak to one of the team. Yes, thank you very much for inviting us today.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I'm sure we'll have some comments and questions. So colleagues, over to you, any questions? I think, I mean, we always have a story at the start of our board meetings to remind ourselves why we're here. And I think what you've just demonstrated is all of those brilliant things that wouldn't happen without the North Care charity. So it's absolutely essential to everything that we're able to do. All of those, as you say, nice to-dos that we don't always have the opportunity to sadly do because of the financial challenges and the focus on providing that outstanding care. I think I certainly had the opportunity to visit some of the recipients of the charity as well. I was there at the opening of the ICU garden, which was fantastic and absolutely amazing to see. And I saw some of the sensory services that we've been able to furnish rooms and the difference it makes for people using those services is absolutely phenomenal. So I think we've been given a pretty firm challenge there, colleagues around the table, to support the North Care charity. And I know Lorna's done some trekking, probably at great expense.
Never again.
To support the charity. So that's certainly something that I'd encourage you all to think about. Okay, well listen, thank you very much for today. Really appreciate it and taking time out and for all the work that you do outside. Absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure we've all experienced Fairfield rewilding as well. I think it's something I heard a lot about before I arrived. I've definitely seen it in action and all of the kind of nature and the work that happens with the local schools, which is brilliant. So I'm looking forward to seeing that as it starts to bloom in the spring when which is hopefully not too far away. So, but thank you for coming and sharing stories with us today. Really appreciate it. Thanks, colleague.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jeff. I didn't say. Oh, sorry. I'm not even looking at the microphone. Sorry, colleagues. Bear with us. Jeff.
That's Chair. Yeah, just as Chair of the Travel and Culture Committee, just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, I think from the presentation this morning, you've seen the tip of an iceberg. You know, for these great examples we heard, there are so many more you could be presented with this morning. And it's not just examples. I think it demonstrates the impact. At our last meeting of the committee, we had a really thorough impact assessment over the last 5 years of the actual value of this work to patients, to our staff and to communities. So the evidence is there technically as well as through the examples. I just wanted to say how grateful I am to Amy, Catherine, Karen and the team who aren't here today. Also to Julie, who heads this up in terms of line management, and the great work that Lorna does strategically supporting us all. And I say that because it's not commonly known is that there are a lot of vacancies in the team at the moment, and the team are working heroically to keep the show on the road despite these vacancies. And I think they've done an absolutely brilliant job. This could have gone badly wrong, but it hasn't because of your dedication and hard work. So thank you. Obviously, meeting you personally and collectively to promote and communicate about the work of North Care is going to help us. This is a competitive field. The charity industry is always after everybody's money. We're in that competitive field, so we need to promote it. If there's one other thing I would suggest we could help with, that's to think about what the next big idea is. So a while ago, North Care funded the heading pad and the Rapture Theatre in the hospital, and that cost millions. But the North Care charity got those millions, and the product is there to see. I think looking forwards, in addition to the work that's going on now, if we come up with the next big idea, that will galvanise the charity there to move into that even bigger space and find those next round of millions. And just to emphasise this, just about North Care raising charitable funds itself, they also go out and drag in money from other funding sources. So there's a huge added value here that it's available to us. We've seen an example of that this morning with the NHS collaboration. So if there's one thing we could do is think about what the next big idea is. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Well said. Thank you for those. Congratulations to the team, so I appreciate that. So I've got Tim, then I've got Suzanne, and then Julie.
Yeah, just a quick one. I mean, the enthusiasm is kind of key to all of this, and you're great examples of that. I suppose the thing that I've noticed, because I've visited one of the sensory rooms and the infant feeding room, and it's the point around staff, Catherine, which I think you've brought out. Our colleagues, I kind of thought at first it's the impact on patient and users is the primary issue, but the colleagues I've seen, they've been so eager to show me and be proud of that and the impact it's made, and I was quite taken aback by that. So I think the real impact I was surprised at is how much our colleagues really value that. That seems to be what I've learned. But fantastic. I mean, a minor one, and it's not here. Maybe I need to speak to Jeff. It's kind of whether in the current setting that definition of what constitutes, NHS added value that comes to the charity, I'd kind of be curious about whether that's a moving sort of point and whether it causes difficulty, but maybe not for now, not for today. Okay, but thanks so much for the work you do.
Thanks, Tim. I think it's a constant check on in the charity funds meeting around that dilemma that you mentioned. So thanks for that. Suzanne?
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo Jeff's comments as well, it's just amazing work. But I cannot let this moment pass without just recognising the leadership from Catherine. For this, particularly the Rewilding project, for the concept to delivery to engagement to actually driving this through. Not only how that's sort of permeated through the finance department, to Tim's point about the moral lift that's given to the team. To drive it forward, but also Catherine's personal investment. So she talked about, this is volunteers and in no time, Catherine has been out there planting bulbs, digging things up, taking Hooby the dog on all the sort of personal commitment and from her and others in this project and leadership shown. I just did not want to pass the moment without calling that out, so thank you.
Could I just echo that, because I think when you talk about the teams, the passion from the teams is what drives us. So when you're working alongside someone from Catherine, that gives us the passion to go out and to get corporate support. So yeah, it works both ways.
Thanks very much. Thanks for that, Suzanne. Julie?
So just I guess a final word. I do absolutely love working with the team, and I get a real energy from it. And some of the things I have to do with direct communication is really challenging, but it's fun and it's not easy. But you make it fun and enjoyable. So thanks for meeting the team. Thanks also to our supporters and people who make donations. Can't do it without them and some other amazing people. I have spent quite a bit of time at Fairfield, and I was looking to meet her being an old boy still. If you haven't been, please go. It's an amazing experience, especially in the spring. Go and have a look. It's wonderful. You could also go and have a look, go to the children's ward at Oldham, where we begin one of our projects right now is raising money for the Sunshine Room. They'll show you what it's like now. They're so excited about it. It's that level of enthusiasm. We really want this, and then you can go and see it after, just to see kind of what difference we've actually made. But thank you for everything you're doing.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Julie. So thank you again, colleagues, for joining us, and hopefully you can hear some of the support and passion for the work that you do as well. So I'm expecting that you'll hear from colleagues around their commitment to supporting the fundraising as well in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you for that. Great start to the meeting. So we move on to apologies for absence, and as far as I'm aware, we've got any apologies for absence. Okay, so on to note. We also need to declare if we've got any interest today. Any declarations of interest, please want to note. So if any do arise during the course of the meeting, then let us know. We can note those at the appropriate time. I've got minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of November. Any comments in relation to the minutes? Be happy to approve those. And I think there's only one outstanding matters arising from that, but that's not due till March. Anybody got any comments in relation to that? No? Okay, thank you. And then matters arising from the previous meeting, action tracker as well to pick up anything on the action tracker there that's raised. No, I think there's just one item that's in progress, not due till the end of May, 6th of May, sorry. No comments in relation to that. Okay, so that's for us to know. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, I'm going to move us on then to the Chief Executive's Horizon Scan. So over to you, Robin.
Thank you, Chair. Again, just assume that the paper is read. I think key things to highlight. Clearly, it's been a challenging festive period and remains a festive challenge, if you can call it that, moving into the new year. A lot of pressures, a lot of colleagues working very, very hard. It's very quick for us to think about things like industrial action and forget that people were working in that context. And I want to just make sure that I use this opportunity to thank people for the efforts, very heroic work that's being done, given the flu and the challenges that we've had around that. I'm pleased linked to that, though, that we've seen progress in our flu vaccination uptake. Clearly, we want to go further, but given where we've been in previous years, I think, again, just wanted to thank particularly some of the flu vaccinators themselves and the work that they've done. They're kind of like the very definition of photobomb, because wherever you are, they appear to be there, waiting to lurk and get somebody vaccinated. So again, just want to make sure that was acknowledged as well. I think it's also worth, and we're not at a stage where publicly the staff survey results will be available. But I think it's just worth noting that 48% of our colleagues, it's less than we achieved in the previous years, but still to be getting to a position where we've got over 9,000 colleagues who have decided to complete our survey, I think is something that we shouldn't just treat lightly. It's an important thing for me, because it still means, regardless of how people feel, they still feel it's worth making the effort. And I think when we see how that particular aspect compares against certainly in our region, I think we'll recognise that that's still some pretty good going moving forward. There's the CQC inspection report of Oldham. Again, it's talked about, we should all have an understanding of that. It's in our paperwork for more general points of view. And I think just a couple of other things I just want to say. In fact, probably the one thing I want to just talk about, which is the final bit about the safe haven work. If you haven't had the opportunity to just take a walk around with colleagues or meet some of the safe haven team, I really encourage you to do so, because the work that they do is what I call absolutely the sharp end. And you might say, the sharp end. Well, ideally, we wouldn't want to be doing the sort of work that involves a need for a safe haven. But in the reality is that when we interact with our patients and service users, there can be some pretty scary moments if you are a colleague working in those environments. And just getting an understanding of how we work with, for example, the police, but also just understanding the pressures that people face when events that we wouldn't want to see happen. So I just want to make a really important plug for that. If you haven't, go see, go listen, and go understand. Happy to take another question, Chair.
Thanks for that, Owen. Any questions or comments? Chief Supervisor. Aziz.
Hi, yeah. In view of the CQC report, I just it's just the language that we're using on it that I'm a bit concerned about, because we're saying here that
The report recognises the improvements the NHS has put in place and will remain focused on tackling the challenges we know we still have. And that sounds a little bit sort of generalised to me and a bit bland, because that was also a phrase we used in an email to staff on the 17th of December. And the CQC was saying that at its last assessment in October 2024, we were in breach of regulations relating to safe care and treatment, staffing and governance. It came back 9 months later in July 2025, and it says, we are still in breach of regulations relating to safe care and treatment, staffing and governance. So in view of that report, I don't think that email to all staff and that this is just a summary, but we emailed all our staff on the 17th of December, and I don't feel that was a clear communication about the importance and urgency of what we now need to do. And the 50-page report from the CQC was attached to that email. And, as someone who's sent emails to staff for years, they won't have read that 50-page report. I'm sure most of us did. And I just think that we need to acknowledge that what we did before hasn't had the result that we would have wanted, and that we need to take that on board for our action plan, which I know you're in the process of doing, and that we need to communicate that clearly to staff. We need to do more, don't we? And I worry about the message we're sending if that's our summary of what the CQC said, because this is kind of quite a big deal, really, that 9 months later that they're reporting this same concern about us. And so I was just concerned about that communication to staff.
Thanks, Steve. I think that's a really well-made point. And Juliet, do you want to pick that up? I know we've got a conversation about this later, but do you want to pick it up?
I'll pick up the issues around governance later. But I think it's a good point, Aziz, and those communications we do think really carefully about, and the staff who were involved in that inspection, the frontline staff at that inspection, did talk to CQC about the improvements that they've made. They were quite proud of the work that they've done. So there's a balance, isn't there, around when you're communicating in a kind of a general sense. What we did want to acknowledge was the work that they were doing and the commitment that they had to delivering safe care patients, and that was acknowledged by the CQC at the time. There's a lot of work going on in the background to work with those same colleagues about the improvements that we need to make. But some of this does sit higher up the organisation in terms of some of those governance. I think we were trying to get the balance, and we did speak to the care org leadership team there. I think some of the staff were quite disappointed. Were going to be quite disappointed by that rating. So I think your point's a good point, and I don't disagree with it, but we did think carefully about how that would feel to those people, because some of them will be that report and will feel quite upset about some of the comments in there. So we did try to strike a balance on that one. And I actually think we got it right, but I do acknowledge your point. There's a lot of communication that's going out to the teams around here. Balance.
Okay. Is that okay, Aziz?
Yeah, I don't think that balance is right, actually, because I think that was a very bland email, and what the CQC was telling us is we are still in breach of regulations on really serious stuff. And yes, I understand we have to keep our staff motivated. You can't do anything without our staff. But sometimes we also have to be really honest in holding a mirror up to ourselves when we get things wrong, to say there needs to be a step change, and we've tried to make a change. And absolutely, the CQC recognised the improvements we've made. But it was saying we were still in breach of the same regulations we were in breach of 9 months ago. That is not a good place to be. I think, actually, we have to be honest with staff about the challenges that we face and the changes that they have to make. I think that is hard, but sometimes we have to be tough on ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure we were in breach at that point of the Regulation 29A linked to that work, with the continuous flow model. Is that correct? I just want to check when we're talking like here. Okay. We now are not in breach in terms of that Regulation 29A for the continuous flow model in all the So that is movement in a direction. We are not in breach, as you would characterise it, if you're talking about the Regulation 29A in Oldham. That is now dealt with. So I just want to be clear. I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding the point you're making when you use the language that we are still in breach.
I'm reading I'm reading what the CQC report says. It didn't give us another Regulation 29A breach, but it says we're still in breach of regulations of stage of treatment. I mean, I'm reading straight from the report. It's summary.
Okay. Lorna, did you want to add anything? Yeah, do you? Oh, it's there.
Take that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Juliet, do you want to respond to that?
So we are in breach of some of the CQC regulations because that's why we're requires improvement. I think the specific thing that they were that they gave the regulation 29A, and we've got a further paper on today around where they've got significant concern about breaching regulation. That has improved it at Oldham, but anytime the CQC identify areas for improvement, they're telling us that is in relation to regulation. So it depends how you want to choose the language, but you're right into the sense of the CQC are requiring us to make improvements in relation to regulatory standards that they assess us against. But there was a specific regulatory action which was around 29A.
Juliet. Jeff?
Thank you, Chair. I actually agree with Aziz that the language here to me feels bland, and it feels lacking honesty and sharpness. I absolutely understand Juliet's point here. This is a judgment, and I fully accept that you are closer to the step than I would be, and you will make that judgment in that context. However, looking at it from a broad perspective, there are other ways of doing this where you can be more honest. And I think, acknowledging to staff and to the public that things are still not right, you can then say to staff, and it's not your fault, it's our fault. And we have to work together to help you to improve. So I think acknowledging that the staff will be upset. They will read the whole report, they'll know things aren't right, and we should be acknowledging staff's own sense of responsibility for their services and saying it's not on you, it's on us to work together on this right. I think that sort of language, in my experience, helps staff. However, I do accept that in the end it's a judgment of matters on the ground, but that's just my view.
Okay, I've got Owen and then Julia.
Yeah, Jeff, I just want to check with you because you used the word honest. And just to check that you're not suggesting that in the way that we are communicating that we are being dishonest.
No, not maybe transparent would be a better word.
Okay, so we're lacking transparency. Because I think part of what I've heard and what I understand to have happened is that this is a narrative in this report here, but there's been a lot of dialogue with people in the service providing the care, lots of conversations, ongoing conversations, which are, where they need to be candid, they are candid. This is a narrative in a horizon scanning report, which you give in a top line view, but sat beneath that, I would have thought would have been discussed at quality committee and other committees, sat beneath that is quite detailed communication work that goes on, and in line with our communicating with you piece of work, which is more about dialogue directly with people as opposed to dialogue that is kind of just background digitally dependent. So I just want to make sure we're really clear about whether we're using a language of honesty or transparency, that we know full facts of what actually has been communicated to colleagues and how that has been received by those colleagues.
So that's probably the first clarification. If we use the wrong word, I apologise for that. But I stand by my overall remarks that when I read this, my reaction was mirroring Izzy's reaction. When you've read the report and read that, the senses, you need to disconnect. So just look at this level. This is the report. I felt the language was 9 compared to the report. So that's very important.
Okay, I think I'm noting those comments around the high-level summary that's in the Chief Exec's Horizon report. However, we have got the item on the agenda. I don't think any of us around the table are in any doubt that this is a serious issue that we need to pay attention to. I think that's what Juliet's been doing with the team. So as well as communicating in an open and transparent way, which I think is what we have done, we've also made sure that we strike that balance of making sure that colleagues know what the work is still to be done, whilst not acknowledging some of the good work that's happened in terms of the progress that they've made. Because if you read the report at Oldham, it does really acknowledge the direction of travel and the things that have happened as well. So I don't want us to lose sight of that. Whilst not saying that we're okay with where we are and we've still got work to do, but I accept that it's a summary paragraph in the Chief Exec's report might not highlight all of those challenges that we know we've still to deal with. So, but I think that is reflected in the appropriate item on the agenda, which is later. So hopefully that helps us all of those issues. I just want to say there's a couple of things in there that I think we should be really, really proud of as well, not least our improvement in terms of flu, which is helping us stay safe in the winter and helping our colleagues and our population stay safe as well. And I'm sure there's still a life with that. Hopefully we're still progressing with that. And we're still as energetic and enthusiastic around that as we have been today. And also some fantastic stuff around that national recognition around safe haven work, which, as always said, sadly, we've experienced personally firsthand at Oldham and the NCA, particularly challenging. So it's good to see that we've put in place some multidisciplinary support around that to make sure that we're able to address some of those challenges as they appear, although we would prefer not to do. Is there anything else that we want to? No? Okay, so that's for us to know. Thank you all for taking us through that. I'm going to move us on, if I can, now to the quality governance review. So we've got Andrew Corbett-Nolan with us from the Good Governance Institute, who'll be able to answer any questions on you might have in relation to the process. But Juliet's going to take us through the report and any kind of key points we want to raise. Andrew, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chair. So just remind us, colleagues, in August 25, we commissioned the Good Governance Institute, and like I say, we've got Chief Executive Andrew Corbett-Nolan here with us today to undertake a review of policy governance across the organisation. We've been keeping the board regularly appraised of progress in relation to that since that time, and we did have some early findings from the
Juliet, can you just?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, we did get some early findings from the review of the development session in December. So what we've got here today is a shortened version of what will be the final report, which we'll get in this month. Which includes the summary of the findings and also key recommendations. We've brought that here today because it does provide a summary, and we want to make sure we get this to a public board. We've also shared this report. We'll share the full report with key stakeholders, including NHS, ICB, and CDC, and they've all already seen this version of this paper. Following this, there will be, when we get the final report, we'll have an action plan developed, which Tim will oversee through board, and we'll get regular updates to board on the action plan. So, but I just wanted to go through some of the findings within here, if I may. And I know everyone's had a chance to read it, and we have discussed it at times, but I think it is important to go back to just remind ourselves what this is about. So for this was a requirement for us intake asked us by region early last year for us to do a quality governance review, because as we've had some conversations that we're concerned about our management of that, and I think indeed this report has found that whilst we have made some improvements since that time, there is some considerable work still to be done. We set out a set key lines of inquiry when we commissioned the report, and Andrew and colleagues to spend quite a bit of time within the organisation and with external stakeholders refining what those terms of reference would be, so we would get the best report that we could and give us the most insight and the most opportunity to improve. So I think the way that we've done that, and we've been regularly working with Andrew and colleagues as findings have emerged to see where we might be able to strengthen the quality of the review in order for us to get to this point where we can feel fairly confident that the recommendations in here and the subsequent actions will get us to a better place if we deliver against this. So I feel a fair amount of confidence, and I think very importantly in terms of CQC and the region, that I think they will have confidence because of the process that we've undertaken to get here. So it is important to remind ourselves that we have engaged in a transparent process, and we've offered up our staff in focus groups and interviews, and the team have had opportunity to go out and look at some of our wards and departments. So this is a review of that. So we should feel very confident, which is important. In terms of the summary of findings, obviously there's some context in there which I'm not going to go through, but one of the things is important, and it's in Chief Executive Horizon Scan, is we're working in a difficult environment at that, and all of us are working in a highly pressurised environment with a lot of competing challenges, and that can sometimes affect our ability to really focus on quality governance to make sure that we're making the right decisions to keep our patients safe and for the right working environment for our staff. So, this isn't easy. It's a difficult thing for us to be doing. A key thing which we know is worth reminding, the way that we set our governance structures up hasn't been in a planned way. It's organic, and it's the result of different organisations working in different ways coming together. It has been some work undertaken to try and get some standardisation across that, but it clearly hasn't taken us to the place we need to be, and that's meant that we haven't had a clear line of sight from ward and departments to board. There are some specific issues which were brought up in the report, and we've had some time to discuss some of those at our session in December, and there's quite a lot of work going to be in. Some of that is around cultural communication, with Fig knows on some ongoing work around mental engagement. We talked about this at the board before, but some really positive things in there. The work we're doing on Making It Right First Time and the reviews that we've undertaken, the level of clinical engagement in that. So I think it's important to see the balance in there, and I think within the culture and communication, one of the things that again really important is senior leaders have spoken very frankly about the organisation and where we're at and what we need to do. So you don't always see that in these types of reports. I'm sure Andrew will give us a little bit of reflection on that. Some of the work that we're doing at the moment, we knew that we did need to review quality governance arrangements as we're moving into the clinically led model, and so the work that we're undertaking now will enable us to respond to things in this report, respond to issues that the CQC have raised, but also take us into the best place for the clinical learning model. So I don't think there's any gaps in what those actions would look like in there. There are some issues around informatics and business intelligence, which we've spoken more about, and that's come through as a theme, and it will be very important as we change the organisational structure. Some really good things about patient experience, which we found, and things that we should be really proud of. That I think we've all made a commitment in this room to really strengthen and focus on patient experience this year. Seen some really good work come through from return to services. We've still got a lot of focus to do on there. It's really good to see there's some good building blocks there. We need to do some more work on quality improvement, and we do, the board particularly, need to do some more work on risk management and insurance systems. So that was kind of just a quick go through the things I think that are important, and will feature in the action plan. We'll get that. We'll get the final report out to board members by the end of this month, probably in the next couple of weeks, and we'll share that report with the key stakeholders at the time. We're working with Julie on the communications out to the organisation, what that will look like, and I think, I get the point I think that Jeff and Aziz have made around what's that communication look like. We have got to get the balance right here for people, so we have got to say there's, I think where's the accountability for where we find ourselves? I think we have to take full ownership of that. The impact of that, I think, is felt by our staff. So I think what we need to communicate is we have taken the opportunity to look at ourselves. We have found things that we're doing well, and actually it's what our staff are doing well. But there are some things to improve. This is what we're going to improve. This is the impact that it should have, and you need to tell us whether it's working or not. So that's the sort of thing that we're working with the comms on this around. So. And obviously, in the clinically led model leadership development programme, we this is featuring governance and risk management is featuring as a part of that. So we'll just be making sure that we integrate all of this, so we're kind of consistent in the language and consistent in the priority factor. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that, Julia. That's really helpful. Obviously, colleagues have the opportunity to understand the report a little bit more. And if you wanted to get this into the public arena at the earliest opportunity in that very open and transparent way. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Rachel?
Thank you.
Nessa?
Just a point of, I think the report's really clear, and I'm actually looking forward to continuing with the work. Actually, I think as a team it's going to be really positive. Where will the progress be reported? Will that be at board, do you think, Juliet, or will that go into one of the committees? Thanks.
Tim, I can answer. I think it will go. I think it ultimately needs to be overseen by the board with the whole thing. But there are quite a few actions which we'd expect to be overseen the detail of it through the policy committee, particular things around quality, governance, and I think people in education would have an interest in some of those as well. But I think we'd agree that we'd bring back bi-monthly updates to board on progress on the actions, so we'd expect to see that back at board next time in the month.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I invite any further questions, Andrew, is there anything you wanted to add by way of your experience of working alongside us? And Juliet talked about colleagues obviously being very open and willing to work with you. Just wondered what your experience was, and obviously sharing the findings with us, how we've responded to that.
Yes. Is this working? Yeah, great, it's working. So GGI did 108 reviews and other pieces of work last year. So about 2/3 of those were in NHS organisations. And over the last 17 years, we've worked with 1,250 organisations. So I think I can talk from a fairly sort of informed base. And you were helpfully unusual in the sort of the thoroughness and approach and openness. And if I could just take 2 minutes to explain how. So firstly, it was a really good commission. It was really well described, and you've been to quite a bit of effort to talk to stakeholders to make sure everything was wrapped up in it. We have, as part of our process, always a sort of scoping phase, and that was less necessary with you than with other organisations, but nevertheless we did. Then, as we went through the process, we had good engagement. So we met with Juliet and Tim every 2 weeks, and we had good access to anybody else that we needed to. The chair, the chief executive, medical director. We found you a very open organisation to deal with, and we were dealt with in a very timely manner. So when we wanted to see more paperwork or go and visit somewhere, it was well facilitated, and the process was a very thorough one, as you can see from the documents, involving multiple different forms of inquiry then brought together. You've dealt also, I think, well with the end of the report as well. So before Christmas, we shared headlines and recommendations in slide form. We then had a good session with the board. You had set aside 3 hours for us to go through it, which was very thorough. And you've taken this report to the first available public board meeting afterwards, so you can get it out there. You've sent the report, or sending a report, to everybody who contributed along the way. And you've already put in place some of the action plans, so board development, work on the assurance structure as a result of the clinical leadership model that's being implemented, some work with the governors and more. This is a large and complicated trust, and part of the findings of the review were difficult, and they came at a bad time. Having done this a lot, I think almost the best predictor of whether the report will lead to ultimate improvement is whether we see a Hawthorne effect at the time we're actually doing it. So a Hawthorne effect is the impact doing the review has on how the board already works and how people reflect. And we've seen that. And we've also seen for example, that as a result of the interviews and some of the questions, you've reached out to other NHS trusts who are a bit ahead of the improvement journey already, and that's really extremely encouraging. I think all these things are sort of emblematic of using this report in a sort of very grown-up way and being very open with how you use it. And what has been really good is to see a shift. So we haven't had any pushback about the findings. The executive and the board have told us that they find that what we've found fair, and they have accepted these as the recommendations too. I don't want to give the impression, though, that we've found all sorts of things that you were unaware of. So what I think you knew what the problems were. You might have not known the exact colour and the depth. You might not have had the evidence base and our requirements to provide that. But again, the exercise was one that confirmed what you knew to be problem areas. The fact-checking, again, is encouraging because there's sort of minimal feedback on the fact-checking, but you did ask us to put 2 more areas into the report. One of is around sort of board skills appropriate what you've got ahead, and the other is about and I think it was a fair shout, with under-rehearsed grift. You've had 12 GIRF reviews in the last 18 months, which is an unusually thorough process. Also, we were, as a result of us doing work, some people came forward and wanted to do interviews. We were very open to those. So we talked to some additional clinicians who weren't on the original list. No one was refused an interview or wanted to speak to us. And also we ran focus groups, which were open and well attended. I think that's all really I'd say, but it's been a pleasure to work with you, and we're looking forward to supporting you with a bit of board development. Many of the findings don't just pertain to clinical governance, and the other sort of final encouraging thing is already you're sort of using the sort of insight from clinical governance to think about other areas as well.
Brilliant, thank you for that, Andrew. That's really helpful. Okay, I'm going to go back to the questions then. So I've got Chris first and then Tim. Oh, you're already present.
Thanks, Andrew. I suppose my question was just picking up on that, almost the last point that you made there, and wondering, the report is really clear. I think it's really helpful, and it's very encouraging to hear the comments you've made about collective response to that. So that is great. Thinking about going forward, a couple of things about the recommendations. How do we make sure that we pick up one of the points that you made at that away day when we discussed it for 3 hours? How do we make sure that we embed this difference that you highlighted between management and assurance? And do you think that the recommendations as they currently stand fully make that distinction? I just wonder, clearly in my question, I wonder whether they do or they don't. The difference between things which are really broad processes and things which are really management processes. Do we need to pay more attention to that?
I think that one of the things you took on the chin, which is quite difficult, is the comments we made about you're not getting the best out of the unitary board. And it is very easy to, particularly when things are difficult, to slip into asking questions which are too superficial and surface, or relying on reassurance. Those are the bad things. So part of the work we think that you agree needs to be done is really to delve into assurance. Now, you're not alone in this. I think assurance has changed massively since the pandemic, and with the rise of certain IT and metrics and more data and bigger expectations from the public and the regulator, it's actually become much more a high level kind of activity. So, for example, we're doing some work with you and the executive leads around the quality committee to get it to, really into the sort of best practice area. But yes, I don't think you've been getting we don't think you've been getting the best out of the unitary board structure yet, where you are one team but with different distinctive roles, using the process of constructive challenge to test ideas, reports and decisions before you bring them to a board here, which is when you put them on the public record. And so that is one area, but you're not alone in that. That's a quite usual issue that trust boards are dealing with at the moment. Does that probably answer your question? Or was there another bit?
Yes, I mean, I suppose it's in the difference between assurance and management processes, which I think, as you've identified and discussed thoroughly, certainly from a quality assurance quality committee point of view, we have bundled those up together to some extent in the past.
I think so, but so you're currently working on the new assurance structure, which is important as part of the CLM. I was yesterday showing, the charts that you're using, and the most important tell is that you are clearly setting up a process whereby management groups report into the executives, and then the committees of the board are a second lock on that. So they are not the assurance process, they are the assurers of the assurance process, which is the higher level activity, if you see what I mean. So that the processes that the accountable officer in law has to run are themselves assured. So yes, the structure is very encouraging in the direction of travel.
Thank you, that's what I was getting.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I've got Tim and then Jeff.
Very fair report. And I think the test is, I recognise the organisation in reading it. So thank you for the work of the team. I suppose it's coming back a bit to the end of Chris's question around. There's a recommendation there that we need to redesign our management group. So it's kind of just testing, i.e., all the groups that are executive or senior management led membership. To the degree of the deficiency that we might have with regard to that, and it's a point you make generally that we don't look at governance in a single piece. I mean, today we're kind of looking at potentially, an exec-led research and innovation focus. We know there's going to be an exec-led risk management group. There's an exec-led change portfolio board. There's an exec-led improvement board that's coming. So it's kind of coming sequentially. It's kind of your view of when and to what extent the non-execs, particularly, because this is for the executive to deliver the strategy, do we need to look at those management groups as a board, because they're kind of being built.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question, Tim. Good point to raise. So, I think one of the flaws that you often see in trusts is that the non-executives don't understand the organisation over which they're presiding, including its assurance system. So the non-executives need to understand the assurance structure that accountable officer and their team has set up. They need to understand how it works, and you'll see in some of their work that we write about having a sort of tacit knowledge of what it's like working in a care group, what a care group assurance meeting is like, what sort of things it looks at. And I think that's part of the triangulation process, is to understand the organisation well, including the elements of the assurance. So we would encourage trusts to use things like walkabouts, not to sort of go and check whether the paint is fresh, but to really understand the dialogue and the discussions that are being had in some of those group meetings, obviously without being part of them. So a strong assurance is both the sort of mechanical bit of looking at the reports, all those things, all those different groups are providing to the executive and to run the assurance process, and understanding that, and to look at whether the dial is being moved, but at the same time, another part is to understand how the mechanics actually work. We think that with practice, for example, there's something like quality committees once a year might maybe have a seminar session where they really understand what is happening in particular care groups in their insurance process. So it's different from going and being part of those groups. It's being very knowledge and understanding of what's going on and picking up that tacit knowledge which enables you to check whether the reports are getting sort of a plausible understanding.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think it's a really good question, Tim. And I'm going to ask Tim to just say a little bit more about what the plans are around that, because I think it's a recommendation to be pulling all of that together so that there is a bit more of a clearer framework for us all to understand. So, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So obviously, through the paper and through the discussion, we've committed to bringing updates back to board, including March, around progress against the overall action plan that will fall out of the report. Understandably, that will be comprehensive. Probably just to lean back to previous discussions through Audit and Risk Committee, particularly, I think it was September and November, where I committed to bringing back an overview of organisational governance around CLM. Our Audit Committee, I think, meets 5th of February and 23rd of April. So subject to agreement with Tim as Chair of Audit and Risk Committee, I do want to bring a paper back around some of the changes that we will be making that are specifically linked to some of the recommendations within the report that Andrew has produced, but also linked to work that we previously had in training for CLM.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And I think we've had a number of conversations at this board in the past about how we gain that assurance and how we understand how the structures work and then test them out in practice in terms of some of our own visibility across the trust. And we might want to reflect on that as we move into CLM about how we do that perhaps differently. And I've got some thoughts around that I want to talk to the board about. Jeff.
Thanks, Chair. 2 points. First of all, quite a narrow tactical question, really, whether within these recommendations there are any that we need to prioritise in order to get things as well as they can be prior to the CQC well-led inspection or whenever the next update of our overall CQC rating is. Are there any priorities here that we need to move more quickly with or not? The second point, first is section on culture, climate, leadership, cycle. In line with the report overall, it's incredibly well written, I thought. I got a lot from this report compared to the very helpful presentation discussion we had. I think seeing it written up this way really helped me get under the skin of all this. And that section in particular, I was struck by the comments about morale and engagement being adversely affected by scrutiny, regulation, and the financial challenges we face. I'm sure you all recognise and feel that. In my own view, maybe there's discussion when we get into some of our core development work, is that this is partly about a sense of lack of agency. But number two, we are reacting, responding all the time. It's maybe part of being in the NHS, but nevertheless, I do feel as if we are buffeted and we are not in control of our own destiny. And let's wonder whether an outcome of all this might be to try and tackle that. And linked to that, the issue of strategy. I fully accept that sometimes, certainly I, as a non-executive director, do stray into management issues. I accept that. The other side of that is whether the board is sufficiently focused on strategy and long-term direction, and whether that could help us tackle this issue of that sense of agency that we have. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's sort of the sort of issue I'm looking forward to getting into the conversation. Thank you.
I don't know if Julia wants to comment on the first bit about prioritisation. I've just got a quick thing to say on the latter.
Julia.
I think if we commissioned originally a quality governance review, then clearly the priorities must fit within the effectiveness of our quality governance systems and processes and the people involved in that. I think we are absolutely on with that work. So I think that arising out of this, that has to be part of it. I think the other thing that we've prioritised is as a board to do the board development work. Part of that work will be around CTC preparation as well. So I do think there is something about, I think, a number of factors. It's supposed to understanding our own organisation. How does it work? What does it deliver? Where are its risks? I think there's that as a board is something we really need to be kind of paying attention to. So I think committing to the board development programme and engaging with that and kind of accelerating our own progress through that, I think is important. And I think those issues around culture and communication would pick up in there. I think so. I think there's the kind of the tactical stuff we need to get on with, which we knew we were doing, but I think it's the board's commitment to supporting the improvements to our quality governance. Because you can do it in two ways, can't you? You can do it in a cheap way, or you can do it in the right way. And I don't mean cheap as in financially. You can just do something which looks good, or you can do something which is. So I think, our ability to test out, how our quality governance system is effective. Does it feel different? Does it feel different on the ground? Does it feel different in this room? I think so. I think that's quite a long answer, but we have to do the quality governance bit, and we have to assure ourselves on that and then engage with the rest.
And you have to do it quickly. So a quick general remark about the NHS and then to you. Government policy and NHS England behaviour, all organisations in opposite directions. So government policy is to empower local NHS organisations through a new advanced foundation trust process to act more independently and be more in tune with local needs and respond to them. At the same time, with performance, productivity and finances, NHS England is much more in the business of micromanaging. So steering the course between those two is difficult for any board. But and this does lead to the sense of the lack of urgency. I think more than the sense of reality of lack of agency. One of the tools that we will use in board development is from Professor King, which very simply is a quadrant with external facing, internal facing, forward looking, backward looking. Now you're at the moment spending more of your time in the bottom left, inward facing, backward looking, than is desired. So if you did a spider diagram, you want to have sort of even match, so you need pushing into the top right quadrant, which is outward facing, forward looking. So one of the things we'll be doing is returning to that several times to see if we can actually get some movement.
Okay, thank you for that. Suzanne?
Thank you. Just thinking about the prioritisation question and the point that Andrew you made in presentations in the report, isn't it, and the discussions that we had at board as well about the applicability of the recommendations wider than this, which was a quality governance which is I think a really important point. Is to clearly prioritise the quality aspects of the degree, but it's how we then choose to use these recommendations in a broader sense, and again it highlights the importance of the work, doesn't it? So in terms of the resourcing requirements, how are we actively taking that into our thinking? Here we talk about quality improvement, but how we use our improvement resource to really get behind the programmes of work that are critical to us, important to us, will help us improve. On the other side of that, how do we think about resourcing in terms of the financial impact of fragmentation or variation? Again, how do we draw those recommendations into the things that we're doing? So I think there's a real opportunity here to broaden this into how it shows up in a lot of pieces of work that we're doing.
I think that's self-evident. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Suzanne. That's really helpful. Okay, colleagues, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to bring the conversation to a close with some great questions. I just wanted to say that I think this is probably one of the most important pieces of work that we have done in my time here. And it's relatively short, but I think it's a pivotal moment for us, really, because I think it's not that we didn't understand that we needed to do some work in this area, but I think it's really been helpful in terms of moving us on at a pace So we've not been waiting until we get the outcome of the review, but we have been able to then focus down into some key areas. And I think what this has given us is a real blueprint for lots of other things. As Suzanne said, it's not just about how we focus on quality governance, but it's actually much wider than that. And I think that will be the really helpful bit for us, certainly as a board, in terms of making sure that we get the assurance that we need. I think the fact that we were able to articulate the scope so well, and Andrew's reflected that back to us, is again a good indication that we knew where the challenges were and what we wanted to identify. And it's great to hear the sort of transparency and the good engagement that we've had across the board. I think that as a board, we really embraced it. As Tim said, we recognise the report. We recognise our organisation in the report. And I think, it gives us an opportunity to really sort of move on and motor and take back some of that agency that I think Jess mentioned as well. So I think that is a danger that we can sometimes slip into when it is a challenging environment. And that's not, that's understandable in lots of ways. But I think this is really positive for us. And it's great to hear that, Andrew and his team are already seeing those reflections and changes in the way that we approach things as a result of the feedback that we've received. And we want to thank all of our colleagues who contributed to this, and obviously we'll engage them in the next steps as well, around how we progress this, because that's going to be the important bit. Obviously we've got the report, now we need to action those recommendations, which are really clear. So we've got a number of recommendations here in our ask today: to note the report, support the recommendations, and receive the update. We're happy to do that. Great, thank you. Okay, we said we'd break at 10:50, which is still a bit over, but I'm conscious that people might need to take the opportunity to leave at this point. So I'm going to suggest that we take a 10-minute break now, and thank Andrew for his time and joining us today. I know you've got to rush off, this will give you an opportunity to do that, and we'll rejoin it at 11:05, and then we'll take the IPR then. Let's resume the meeting. So we're moving on to item 10, which is the integrated Leah.
Okay, so I will canter through the last few committees. I don't like to.
Which is the integrated. There we are.
Okay, thank you. So just focusing on those areas that we have yet to make some of the improvements that we would like to be seeing, although confident that we are seeing some improvements. We have to flag some of those areas. Sickness absence remains above plan for us, and that is material for all of us, because that really impacts our ability to deliver on the work that we need to get done. In the UEC space, it is winter, and we are feeling winter across all of our hospital sites. That said, we have seen a 4.9% improvement on this November-December versus last year, but we still have patients who are waiting in our corridors, are waiting longer than the time that we would want them to to be seen for their treatments. We have plans in place that are ongoing to address those, some short term and some medium term. Our RTT, overall, our referral to treatment time, has largely flatlined in our size of our waiting list. We continue to see reductions in the number of 65 weeks, our longest waiting patients. But again, that is not in line with our plan and not where we want it to be. We are in receipt of some additional monies this month to make a focused effort on validation for our waiting lists, to make sure that they are clean and representative of both our position and where our staff need to focus their energies to get our patients treated. I will pause there for questions.
Okay, thanks, Leah. Any comments or questions, please, on the IPR? These?
Yeah, there were two rises in MRSA and stillbirth, both showing special cause variation. But there was no commentary on that, and I just wondered if there was any commentary from any of the execs on that.
Okay. Juliet, did you want to pick that up?
But MRSA, we've had the longest period without an MRSA infection. I think that's a rolling average in there. The actual absolute numbers, we've seen a improvement in MRSA numbers, so we should expect to see that the rolling number come down. Which one are you? I see MRSA as improving, but
I think it's in the summary page, isn't it? It's in the box.
It is page. Sorry.
It's page 45 of 269. Is that the one you're referring to, Aziz? It's in the box of special cause concerning under consistently failing target.
Well, the stillbirths one is page 14 of 21 of this report.
It's right above.
It's right above it, is it? Yes, there you go. Yeah. So, yeah, 14 of 21, both of them are on there.
Yeah, so the MRSA picture is improving. I think we've been, so get to my page now. I think we've been over 90 days without an MRSA bacteremia, which is an improvement.
Okay.
And the stillbirth it's in place paper. No, it's not in place paper. I'll answer. Sorry, I was going to think about that one.
I don't think below. I just wondered why there wasn't commentary this time. Whether there's a problem with
I don't think we've got concerns about stillbirth rates. We would have got commentary, but I'll just think about a better answer than that. That's reassuring.
If you remember, as the quality committee, we looked at stillbirth rate, and this is a rolling average, and this is the reflection of the fact that there was an increase in the number of stillbirths at the early part of last year, which I think is still sticking. So
this rolling average is higher than a year ago. The December 24 number is 4, and the December 25 number is 5. Above 5, it's above the red line basically now, and it shows special cause variation. It's risen.
Okay, page 14. Sorry,
it is.
Which I mean, I'm looking at this graph, and it just seemed to be at odds with what we discussed at quality committee. That's why I'm looking at it and going, I didn't recognise it. You see, Chris.
Yeah.
Let's pick that up outside and get an answer respond to your query, Aziz. Okay. Leah, you got your light on still for answering any questions?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've got Carmen and then Jeff.
Was that on now?
Yeah.
So I was going to pick up on stillbirth, so thank you, Aziz, for raising it. The other point is hand hygiene. Compliance is concerning that we're still quite away from the target that we're looking for. And I can see some actions, and it's good that we've got actions and we've got an improvement collaborative focused on this. But I'm starting to wonder is what's the leadership culture at each of the sites and each of the locations about hand hygiene? Because for me, a health professional at any level, just basically wash their hands and follow the amendments. So it's just a concern about how we ensure that the culture is driving the change that we want.
Yeah.
I'll go first. With people coming behind me. I mean, the reason we put it on here is because we weren't having the standards of compliance that we expected to see. There is a lot of work going on. We are seeing some improvements in some areas, but not the level of improvement that we would want to see. It continues to be an area of focus, and it will be until we get it to the rates that we expect it to be. We have got leadership focused on this in terms of within the care organisations and within the specialties. the people talk specifically around medical workforce. I think that is one of the areas we have been paying particular attention to. We've put monitoring of hand hygiene compliance in our new audit tool that we're rolling out now. So we're putting in more opportunities to observe it, more opportunities to feed back on it. But I think there is still some cultural work that we need to do around the reasons why people aren't complying with hand hygiene. So quite medical work.
Thank you, Chair. So Juliet's covered the general picture, and more specifically, when we've looked at this, we have found when we look at the organisation, there's a perception amongst some of our leaders that essentially that they wouldn't be supportive to hold funds to account around some of this. So there's still a little bit of archaic cultural approach around this. Some of it pertaining to our medical colleagues, so we're doing some work on that just to ensure that it's clear, supporting the team. We'll be bringing some of this into our performance culture.
Thank you. Jeff?
Chair, very briefly, just a thank you that there is now at slide 17 a really good set of data on community health services without the usual caveats about the data not being accurate. So thank you for that. Slight suggestion that the next stage might include data on medically discharged, medically optimised for discharge across all the hospitals of the solvent, so you understand the impact of that on length of stay. But it's a good. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? I just had one on the Never events. So looking at the sort of picture, I just wondered, are we an outlier in terms of numbers of Never events that we've got inside the organisation?
No, that's a Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we continue to have concerns around Never events. We've definitely, we weren't an outlier before in GM, and there were other organisations who had bigger challenges than us. We've done some work to it at the Central Quality Committee. We don't think that we have completely resolved the issue, as you're saying, with the remaining Never events continuing to come. We've discussed in the Quality Committee, we've discussed this with ICD colleagues, and we'll be bringing a proposed piece of work through the Quality Committee, which we'll also discuss with ICD around interventions around this. But it's an area of focus and concern.
I think coupled with the audit reports as well around sort of the procedures that we've got, I think adds to that picture of concern, I guess, we're looking at we're paying attention to. Thank you that you're picking that up. Thank you for that. Also, just wanted to mention about urgent and emergency care. I think actually challenging time. I was in the emergency department last week. Actually, I did a joint visit with Pennine Care to see some of the work that's happening around mental health in the trust and the impact of having to respond to work where there aren't appropriate placements for not just adults, but actually children and people as well, which was really challenging. But I just wondered what, I know there's been a lot of public interest in 12-hour wait and trolley care, corridor care, which we obviously don't want to see either. I just wondered if you could share a little bit about what we're doing around that approach, Leah, around, not accepting that as the normal approach, but actually responding to that where we can.
So dual approach, we have some actions in place for improving escalation within the department so that we are responding more timely to patients moving patients through the into the general bed stock. But we can only do that if beds are available. So we are looking. We started collaborative in February, which is looking at our long lengths of stay and how we reduce those, and we have both to get into line with our length of stay, expected length of stay for patients, and also when patients are ready to go home, that we've got robust processes in place to get them discharged as quickly as possible for patients who
can just go home, that we're able to discharge them before midday, and for patients who require more complex moves into intermediate care or first support, that we work with we continue to work with our locality partners. We have some good practice within our locality, some particularly good experience in Bury that we want to make sure we adopt across all of
Okay, that's good to hear. Thanks, Leah. And Rachel.
There are quite a number of improvements, particularly in some of the rolling averages. And I guess one of the things I'm not always able to do in the report is spot whether or not this has been a conscious outcome of work and investment on our part, or whether there is a change in luck, if you like. So, if we take, for example, the number of falls, that has gone down. I think two parts of the question really, I guess, is there clarity on where some of those improvements are discussed and where we get to hear about the learnings that we could then take on to other areas? And as a NED that isn't in all of those committees, where would I get to see some of that learning, hear about it? Thanks. Do you want to get that?
Thank you.
So I would hope that most of it isn't luck. I would hope most of it is real management. In terms of falls, as you know, or you might not know, but I'll remind you, we have been doing quite a lot of focus work on the supervision of patients who are at risk of falling, and it's work being led by one of our directors of nursing. So we're making sure we've got the right intervention, so we've been having to focus on fall prevention. And we'll always monitor falls because can cause significant harm to people who fall. Sometimes those falls are unavoidable, but we try to make sure we're putting the intervention in place to prevent those avoidable ones. Most a lot of that's supervision. There's still quite a bit of work to do. All of that is, we've got various places within the organisation where that's monitored, but it just got and it's very up to quality committee, but quite a lot of area of focus on falls prevention.
I think our organisation hearing us acknowledge and talk about the positive aspects of the investment of their work. It's just making sure that is happening somewhere, and that we're not just focusing on where things are a worsening position, I guess. But more so that, we're learning that actually when we've got that active, focused investment in addressing an issue, we're seeing success. And I guess on a rolling basis, what are our sets of focus going to be, and how does that look over the next 12 months? I think we had that great board development session when we talked about hands, falls, etc. And what are the next set going to be as we start to improve some of these measures?
It's a really good question. So I think what I'm certainly seeing more recently, and I think that's part of our leadership buy-in to the clinical model and the changes. We're seeing more cross care org working now. I think we're seeing it in all of our disciplines, but seeing a lot of that within nursing. So we're now looking at best practice across the organisation. We're just doing some really good work on pressure ulcers at the moment, and we're seeing differences in where those being categorised and reporting, and different ways of intervention. So I think we're starting to see more cross-organisational sharing of learning. I think we'll continue to see that as we move into the new model of some of the GIRFT work that we're seeing. So you can kind of see a real shift in this cross-care org working, moving into that clinical models. And a lot of the work that we're purposely doing is setting up some of those oversight, kind of management oversight in those particular areas, folks like babies, maternity, children, where we'll make sure we're kind of understanding where we have got excellent practice in and adopting that, and where we've got some risk of how we might share anything of that. Again, there's another good place we're doing. I think probably all organisations now supporting solving to improve. So seeing a lot more of that. We could probably bring that. We could probably make sure we kind of emphasise some of that. It is a result of us purposely bringing teams across the organisation in. So it's been quite a lot of that.
Great, thank
you.
Just to add briefly to that, the vast majority of things in the integrated report will have some sort of work happening sort of around So we discussed some examples where we're having some very positive impact, but also like Joe's raising with lever events program work that's happening around that isn't giving us the change. So we have a mix of both. I think we need to recognise as well that just what we're delivering in an organisation like this and healthcare setting really complex, and it will apply, for example, when we're discussing mortality data. It isn't always easy to say we've made that one change that's led to either deterioration. So it'll be a suite of measures. And the final thing that I think you should just to try to reply what it was seen in the GGR report that we discussed earlier. The comment about refreshing how we approach the patient safety local priorities, which is again something we're going to actively look at because again that dictates some of the big piece of work that we push through in the organisation too.
Okay, thank you for that, colleagues. We have got some narrative on the stillbirth thinking in phase reports also, so unless you wanted to add anything now, we can pick that up there if you want.
Well, if I may, I just add in. So I'm just looking at what if that went to quality committee where we did talk about the two incidents. So I think we've had assurance in quality committee that all of the incidents of stillbirth have been investigated. We did also at the quad meeting, Tim. We did have an explanation, didn't we, of the new surveillance system in place for stillbirth, and I think that it just refers to that in her report. So I don't think I think everything's been investigated as it should. We've had oversight, national oversight of that as well. So I think we did receive assurance in there that that's been had appropriate investigations into those, and any appropriate learnings being shared. Pick that up. But we did receive a detailed report with the policy committee on that.
Thank you.
And the meeting as well. That seems to be that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So thanks, colleagues. We are required to receive the IPR and note the assurances of better improvement. And of course, this isn't the only opportunity we get to delve into those actions around the integrated performance report, because we're looking at those in the individual committees. And there is further information in terms of some of that benchmarking, wider kind of consideration, reading group of colleagues that want to have a look there as well in terms of what else is happening. But I think the point you're making, Rachel, around that learning organisation is what we're on the journey to, really, isn't it? About how we get those opportunities, never events being a good example of that. Because things will always happen. It's just how we respond to that and how we learn. Thank you for that. So, colleagues, we're happy to receive the updates and the assurance. Okay, thank you. Let's move on then to the change portfolio reports, and we've got Louise joining us, so welcome, Louise. So we've got two sections. First is on the AAA reports for November and December. Are you happy for them to be taken this read, Owen? Any questions on the change portfolio updates? No? Oh, sorry. Hang on. Juliet.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Anything from me?
No, I'm just ready his questions.
Okay. No questions? Okay, great. Colleagues, that's for us to note. And then moving on to the portfolio assurance report, for us. Hopefully everyone's had the opportunity to read that. Anything you wanted to add, Louise?
If I could just throw out a couple of things, if that's okay. So the format of the report is as usual. Just to go out one thing around an additional programme that we're assuring this time round. So the total number of programmes in the portfolio in December in this report was 13. That's the increase of 1 since the last report through to 4, and that's around the financial sustainability programme in terms of its overarching sense. So FSP has always been one of the 4 strategic boulders, but historically we've kind of assured it through its 8 constituent programmes. But as the new FSP developed for 26-27, we propose that we assure the development of that piece of work separately, and then what's shown as a separate line there on the dashboard. Change portfolio goals supports with that, so we'll start to see the assurance commentary coming through the report
in the next iteration. And also in terms of assurance, there was an increase in the number of programmes that we assured in this particular report, and that was the repatriation of adult social care services, or Programme Unify, that we commenced assurance of in November. And just one further thing really to draw out, so as you can see, as usual, graphs and the movement month on month. There was a decrease in the number of red rag ratings from a delivery perspective in month. So the programme remains rag rated red. From a delivery perspective, remains the clinical leadership model. From a governance perspective, that's due to the work outstanding around developing a coherent set of benefits, aligning some kind of overarching programme benefits and presenting that evidence through to programme board. As a programme, it does remain amber rag rated from a delivery perspective. The driver behind that is around the programme milestones relating to the consultation process. At the time that we did the review, the programme milestone had moved or delayed, but at the time that hadn't been presented through to programme board, so the impact on the overall programme plan wasn't clear. So the amber rag rating just reflects the potential risk to delivery around that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Louise. I thought it was a really helpful report. Thank you. Jeff?
Check what Louise said about the review of the portfolio itself. I think it's not likely to me that you need to review the 8 components under the financial stability plan. So they don't seem to me to be the ones that really need to be focused on now. Does that mean that we will have a completely new set of priorities under that heading? That will flow straight out of what we're doing on the financial performance plan for the next 2 years?
Yes, so yeah, in short, yeah, the eight constituent programmes that are shown there under the FSP banner are for 25-26, and as FSP is developed through 26-27 and beyond, we'll see that makeup shift. I wouldn't necessarily expect to see the four boulders across the top necessarily changing, but obviously again that's driven by the organisation's strategy. So again, as that emerges over the next few months, that could be an opportunity to revisit the scope of the portfolio.
Thank you.
Louise? Rachel?
Wanting to acknowledge the fact that you've conducted 2 post-implementation reviews, and I think again this from a learning perspective is really positive to see. And in the explanations there, we're talking about some, really revisiting, did we deliver those objectives? Did we see the financial, or any kind of efficiency that we wanted from that and that measurement? And what I like though is that you've got actions or things that you've learned that actually we should have done, and you're putting that into other programmes that are part of our portfolio. That's really positive for me to see that. I think that is just another bit of evidence to the maturity and the direction that we're going around management of change. Projects don't just get dropped. It's all about that consistency of feeding it through and the thoroughness of the portfolio. So, yeah, just wanted to say really positive to see those happening. Thanks to the execs as well supporting those processes.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other comments or questions on the page portfolio report? Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, it's just really to hopefully build on Louise's response to Jeff's question. So I think the constituent parts of the FSP, as they appear in this scope, are likely to remain for assurance, would be my assumption. And to give you an indication of why, the procurement effort will be, and these are provisional targets that imply the region. The procurement effort is likely to be in the region of 5.8 million meds management, almost 2 million nursing and AHP, 6.4 million medical workforce, 11.4 million. Corporate and digital are both significant. So I think there could be change portfolio board would still be in a position, well, I'm not speaking for it, but they would want assurance that those things are happening if they add up to a substantial amount of money, and their procurement example is their vocation to generate those types of savings. What I think we don't readily see in the assurance framework scope is all the work that then goes on
currently in care organisations, in future clinical groups, where they have myriad projects, initiatives that may be around productivity, that may be around staffing in other ways, which may be around the skill mix and doing things differently. And all of those channel through eHub. And as individually, as we've discussed before, there are several hundred of those initiatives. It wouldn't be wise to start trying to assure those from the change portfolio. So I think that mix is an important point to get across. And the programmes that are currently there may well, to Jeff's point, need to be added to, certainly. But I wouldn't readily see an argument for removing the insurance framework. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I can both on this point and just probably down with all the building. And just to your point, Jeff, we absolutely are giving some thought to how we maintain the assurance that we need on those elements, but we do have to. So the thematics that will be coming out will be things like length of stay, outpatient, data productivity. So we've really started to make sure that whether it's the GERD information, whether it's the model health system, whether it's productivity, but how are we using some of that intelligence to inform the areas of focus that we will want to take into 26, 27. So in that sense, you will see some adjustment and change in where that focus.
Thanks for that, Suzanne. Okay, any other comments or questions? No? So colleagues, we've got a couple of recommendations in relation to that. So obviously receiving the report, supporting the changes in the change portfolio, any parts of the framework, and request action from the senior responsible officers to bring those recommendations. Thank you. Thanks, Louise. Okay, colleagues, we've been joined by Faith and Annabelle. Hi, Annabelle. I don't think we've met before. Nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to suggest, colleagues, we're running a bit late on the agenda, so we're going to jump over to your item on the agenda, and then we can let you get off, because I'm sure you've got lots of other important things to get on with. So, colleagues, I'm going to move to item 13.3, which is the maternity incentive scheme, and I'm going to hand over to Julia and Faith to take us through that.
I'll just hand over to Faith and Annabelle, if that's okay. We do need to receive this here because it is for board declaration, so that's
just might help as well, Chairman, just to say that we've scrutinised this in some detail in the quality committee. The recommendation from the quality committee is for the board to approve it itself. Just so that that's the context.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we're here to present the maternity incentive scheme outcomes for year 7, and can you believe it is year 7? This is the third year now that I've been aboard with Annabelle and others to present this paper. So just to give you some context, as Chris Harrison has already mentioned, this review of the evidence has already been through a high level of rigor. So internally, the evidence has already been reviewed by our governance team and the old care organisations through a senior management team. The externally assured through the LMNS. So you remember last year they implemented a new process by which they would review all our evidence to cast a fresh eyes approach and ensure that we were meeting the required standards of assurance, and that process has continued into year 7, and they are in agreement, as you'll see within the paper, with all the evidence that we've submitted and our compliance. I think it is important to note that there is a significant amount of work that goes into collating this evidence. It is business as usual, it happens every year. However, there can be some nuances and some slight tweaks to reporting year on year. And we generally tend to get the requirements for the following year in around March, April time. So we continue to work throughout the year on this programme and review the new requirements in April when they are released, working towards the submission. So the declaration for this year is required at the beginning of March. So following the board today, we will notify the LMNS that the board have reviewed paper, that they are happy with that level of assurance, and then the Chief Executive, Dr. Owen Williams, would be expected to sign that declaration form.
We will then send that declaration form again through to the ILMS, and we'll forward it to the ICB, and the ICB have that oversight of all maternity services within Greater Manchester declarations. It will then come back to us as a maternity service, and then we will submit that to NHS England. So this year, year 7, we will be submitting that we are compliant with 9 out of 10 of the safety actions. And you'll note within the paper, the safety action that we're reporting non-compliance with is safety action 1, which relates to the perinatal mortality review tool. Now, within this safety action, there is a requirement that any deaths that fit the criteria are reported within 7 days of the death. Unfortunately, just as we were about to finish this year's compliance, there was a baby who was brought into our A&E Oldham, who was 5 days postnatally as a sudden infant death. It was reported to the Child Death Overview Panel, but at the time there was a new system nationally being implemented for reporting, a single platform which is known as and unfortunately, there was a breakdown in that process. So whilst it was reported to the Child Death Overview Panel, it wasn't also reported through SPED due to that timescale and the change in process. We have spoken to NHS Resolution and took advice from the LMNS about, where do we come with it? We want to report non-compliance because we want to be open, honest and transparent. But yet it seems a real shame when we reported 45 deaths and there's just 1 death that we haven't reported. So their advice was to review the case. They agreed that it had been reported, albeit late, and we have developed an action plan that you'll see in Appendix A that details the actions that we've taken today and reduce the instance of repetition. We will be submitting this to NHS Resolution and the IMNS and the NHS Resolution. We're fairly confident that based on the action plan, they would look to potentially upgrade us to 10 out of 10, but we cannot predict that until we get those final results. So in summary, we will be submitting compliance with 9 out of 10. It will go to NHS Resolution. They will review, look at the action plan, and we very much hope that we will be upgraded to 10 out of 10.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that, Craig and Juliet. Any questions or comments? Carmen?
Thanks, Annabelle. It's great to hear the level of compliance that we're at and all the work that's gone into it. I had a question about safety action 7. We are reporting it as compliant. Can we do that if we say that we have the maternity voice person hasn't been trained to attend perinatal mortality reviews, or is that not material enough to take us into non-compliance?
So nationally, it has been recognised that many of the maternity and neonatal voice partnerships colleagues haven't yet been trained in the PMRT process. So whilst it was a standard that was implemented as part of Year 7, there is a recognition from NHS Resolution that many providers won't be able to meet that level of compliance with that safety action. Therefore, we did escalate to the LMNS that we would be non-compliant with that particular aspect of the safety action. And as we've done that, and all of the providers have done that, NHS Resolution has said, as long as we've declared to the LMNS that we are non-compliant, we will there by default be compliant.
Okay, thank you. It's clear.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, Juliet, did you want to add that?
I just, it's not easy to get to this level of compliance, and it's not easy to stay there. So I just did want to commend. I mean, it's a huge amount of work. The service is incredibly well governed. The teams are highly responsive to issues. They submit themselves to a huge amount of scrutiny. Him and I go to the perinatal quad meeting. So, it's not to be underestimated, and it's something, to talk about your point, make sure we're talking about how we demonstrate this level of assurance, this level of insight, scrutiny throughout our other services. We know why there's a significant level of risk, but I just wanted to thank Annabelle and Faith for getting us as an organisation to this level. So you just give my thanks. It's not, it isn't easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Annabelle, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I just want to say thank you to Ben actually. And with Redeem has done a lot of work. I mean, I'm there to support, and obviously we have some elements within the safety actions that I'm responsible for as well. But a lot of the work are done by with a colleague and the great leadership, I say. Yeah.
Thanks, Anna.
Team.
Are we?
Yeah, and it didn't always used to be the case, did it? You know, there's been some movement there, and you know, just a recount that 3R played a role in some of the journey that we've been on around it. I just want to build on Juliet's point and link it a little bit back from the conversation you just had regarding the change portfolio board. I think this is why maternity services will remain a core boulder going forward, because as Juliet has articulated, and I think it's a point Rachel's made, if you can get to a stage whereby you can learn from maternity services, it's not just maternity services, where some governance requirements and the level of scrutiny and focus on quality, where some of those things could apply to other service areas as well. So I just want to make that point, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I just want to say thank you to you both for joining us today and for all the hard work that goes into this, because no, it's not easy. And it's just makes sense. It's business as usual. So as soon as you finish one, you start in the next one. So we really appreciate that, and it is a great position to be in that we're compliant on all of those. Hopefully on the 10th one as well, once we get feedback from NHS resolution, and I think certainly the board would be very supportive of us adopting that open and transparent approach rather than trying to say we're not when potentially that could be raised. It's absolutely, I think, the right call to raise that in the way that you have. So thank you for that. And a personal thanks to Tim as well for his contribution as the maternity safety champion. I know he invests a lot of time in going and making sure that that assurance is gained as well in lots of different ways. And I know you've been spending a lot of time speaking to mums and their families now as well. So that's great, great to see. So thank you for that.
Well, there's a walk around actually next week, isn't there? So if any others want to join me, that would be great.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. So colleagues, are we happy to agree all of the recommendations and agree that Owen should sign the declaration? Yeah. Thanks, colleagues. Thanks, Annabelle. Thanks for joining. Okay, colleagues, I'm going to move you back on the agenda then to the final performance report. So, Jeff, anything to add in terms of the update?
Just draw up the alerts, Chair, because it's put together for asking questions or comments. The November meeting had 3 alerts. First, concerning the risk of crash for the event, and although that risk has reduced somewhat because we have been able to confirm the continuation of this deficit support fund in the first year, thanks to Suzanne and the team navigating that process. Nevertheless, the risk still remains, and the committee agreed to recommend to the board that an application for productive capital support NHS England should be made ready to submit if needed. And they will talk about that this afternoon in terms of detail for this year and indeed next year. Second alert was concerning the development of the new financial support for that financial stability plan in the next 3-year period. The committee considered the detail of operational, strategic and structural drivers of deficit and really focus work which will now inform the next stage of the planning to get to deficit over the next period. Final alert from the November meeting was relating to the in-year position and the risk of, even with deficit support funding, not getting to balance. Suzanne will give us a more recent update from month 8. Next item on the agenda, Chair, so I'm not saying that. Turning briefly to the December meeting, as colleagues know, this was an important and extraordinary meeting to inform other members of the board, including yourself, Chair, invited. And the key decision was whether to submit a draft plan for finance for the workforce for the next 2 years, which was either compliant or not compliant with the requirement that we remove the deficit and achieve our performance target. So the next 2 year period, the committee discussed the scale of that challenge, fully discussed the scale of cost improvement programme, it applied with that 5% fully cash releasing current, and also the challenges concerning was particularly referral to treatment and the workforce implications of those challenges. In light of those challenges, the committee, after further conversations with yourself, the chief executive and the chief finance officer and myself, agreed to submit a compliant plan. The next stage of that process is still to be completed. We'll discuss that this afternoon and the next finance committee. I want to emphasise that that was a considered decision, and we rejected eventually the option of not saying we would be compliant, not setting the challenges, because to do otherwise would have given all the wrong signals about our level of ambition and leadership, and it would have invited a level of intervention which would have seeked to take us to a destination without us having our hands on the controls of a destination. Happy to take the question. Receiving the comments from that, Chair.
Thanks, Jeff. Any questions or comments on the update report on November and December? No, thank you. Thank you for that comprehensive overview. We'll move on to the second part of the finance and performance update and Suzanne's report. Suzanne.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, given that we've already closed month 9, focus on cumulative position, say. So at month 8, we had a year-to-date deficit of 23.5 million, which is marginally ahead of the plan that we set out. If we exclude the deficit support funding, that leaves us with a 62.1 million deficit. In terms of some of the pressures that we're seeing, they remain consistent with those that I've reported previously. So they are materially related to ERF overperformance, with which we're having ongoing conversations with our commissioners as part of our recovery work around adult social care and around industrial action. Just in relation to industrial action, we have had some positive news that we've received notification that we've had some financial support, which will go some way to contributing towards past episodes of industrial action and the more recent one, which was just before the festive period, which is helpful in terms of that additional pressure that we've been carrying throughout the course of the year. Just as a very early heads up, we have, as I said, we've closed down our 9 position, and we expect to remain on plan for month 9 as well. Just moving this to forecast and to remind board, and I think I remind board at every meeting when I give the finance update, that our plan was back-ended, which means it becomes more challenging as the year progresses. Q4 in particular will be our most challenging period when our cost improvement requirement increases. So that said, we continue to remain committed to delivering our break-even plan. And as the Chair of Finance and Performance Committee has already alluded to, that carries risk at the moment. But we're working incredibly tightly towards the financial recovery plan that the board approved back in September time. And as part of the conversations that we've had around next year's plan, we've also launched what we describe as a Q4 sprint, which is making sure we're really focused on doing everything that we can to make sure we live within this year's plan to help soften the challenge that will take us into 26, 27, but we know we'll have another incredibly challenging financial position to deliver. So that focus on easing our exit run rate will be all down focused in for the next 3 months to start that work. I'd like to touch on cost improvement. So some of the pressures that I've referred to have been offset by our over-delivery year to date on cost improvement, albeit by non-recurrent nature. And again, our focus for the remainder of this year is on our recurrent cost improvement for the same reasons that is going to really help mitigate some of the risks and ease the pressure into next financial year. But at the point of writing this report, we've transacted 87.2 million of our cost improvement programme. So just reflecting back to last year, we achieved 90 million. So, you know, textually, that is incredible progress to have transacted that level of cost improvement, given some of the challenges that we're facing. But again, our focus will be on recurrent. The Chair of the Finance and Control Committee has already sort of flagged the risks around cash, and that does still remain challenging for us. The assurance process that NHS has set out is in itself challenging, as you would expect. And to ensure that the board is focused on this remains a priority for us. Achievement of the deficit support plan in Q4 is helpful. And I think the detailed assurance work that we did, particularly around 1.8 and 1.9, has helped. So now we've got forward achievement without the assurance process that then necessarily goes with that. But I have to flag that there is still the ability to that to be clawed back should we not deliver on what we set out in our financial plan. So it gives a little bit of certainty going forward, but we need to make sure we maintain delivery if we want to secure that and continue to secure that. Hence, we will get a conversation later in the board about what cash support looks like and what that process we will need to follow entails. That's all I was going to like in terms of the report form. Questions.
Thanks, Suzanne. Any questions or comments from colleagues? Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Suzanne. So I just on kind of third rereading this paper and on the back of some other discussions in other forums this week, it's more of an observation really that the report focus on pay, section 5, and then the temporary staffing bill might not be everything that's needed to ride exactly what's happening and then to support and challenge that effort. And I say that in the light of the continuing financial challenge and that pay is some 70% of the overall NCA picture. And if I can just briefly, will be brief, illustrate that. On page 3 of the report, it presents the key risks to delivery of the financial plan, and at number 2 is the CIP programme, and at number 7 is the reduction in temporary staffing. And then looking at aspects of the staffing bill at pages 8 and 9, for example, it refers to the plan for bank in month being 4.7 million. And it then, on the left-hand side, talks about bank being overspent by 14 million, 1.9 of which is industrial action. And moving on to the next slide, slide 9, looking at the graph then for bank spend by month, the plan, the 25-26 plan, never appears to go below 6 million by month. So there's a discrepancy there between the 4.7 on the earlier slide and then what appears to be just above 6 million plan for November. I think the other point was in the narrative on bank spend. There's a national expectation for 10% reduction on 24-25. Again, looking at the graph, it's not easy to tell from the bar chart. It looks as if the NCA plan was probably 20% reduction on 24-25. But again, that's not explicit in the report. Excluding the industrial action, and again, just having to do some maths and find the answer, it looks like year to date we're 7.8% below, as opposed to the 10%. I guess why I was drawing that out is that I think it's a difficult picture to construct. It's certainly been, I found it complex in the 2 years I've been with you. And I just think in and amongst the 270 pages of what the Trust Board is looking at, I think it would bear more detail and a richer picture of pay, spend, particularly premium spend, with a narrative that isn't just the observations of
finance colleagues, which are well made, and vast majority seem entirely accurate. But it's a picture that I think needs to be shared more by the executive team, perhaps, before it comes here. And the bits that I'd personally be looking for were a clearer and richer narrative. So if we were aiming at 20%, but we're at 7%, that begs a quite large question. What more do we need to do and how do we do it? And that doesn't come out from the report, as well as some mitigations and actions, because there are a lot of questions just left hanging here about, for example, 14 million above plan. Well, what's happening? Learning from plans, because looking at the agency and bank spend, they both appear to be very linear lines that don't have any sensitivity in them around summer, winter. Particularly looking at agency plan by month now, it seems to reduce from November to March by half. And I'm not sure, how feasible that plan is over December, January, February, March. And then the final point is just about trends, because there's still a lot of comparison to the NHS, rightly or wrongly, about where was the NHS in 1920. And I think we're perhaps losing something because we can't see the numbers here about where were we 1 year ago, where were we 2 years ago, to see that progress. And I think that's also illustrated by the fact that earlier finance reports, I looked back to September, had the numbers tabulated. So you can see that the 19,000 substantive to 1,500 bank, there was 50 agency people in that month. In going through the graphs, which I applaud in one way, because it's easy to cast an eye over, I think we lost some of the detail that was contained in there. So I hope that illustrates the point. And I do think, even though a lot of this will be seeing subcommittees in other places, I think given the financial context, much richer and more expansive reports on this would be merited. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Jeff. Any reflections from colleagues on that? I'm including Jeff in that, probably as chair of finance and funds. I don't know if you see that level of detail that we're not seeing here, that Joe suggested it might be clearer to see.
I think you make a lot of very sound points, actually. And I would say, as chair of Finance and Reports Committee, at least in the last 6 months, I don't think we've paid enough attention to the workforce side. There's no fault for the executive, I think, like sharing, but we haven't actually scrutinised the workforce side. And I think we do need to, with Joe's help, look at the data and really make sure that we are giving it the right attention looking forward. But to do so in a way that doesn't in any way loosen the responsibility of the Review and Education Committee, but to be focused on as well, to make sure that action is taken. So I think I'll have to take away some thinking about that.
Suzanne, anything from you?
Yeah. So happy, thank you for feedback. All feedback's good feedback, isn't it? So maybe there is something we can reflect on in terms of finance and funds, but I don't want to lose some of the key headlines. And put out in this report, that's another reflection, isn't it? But whilst our bank and agency spend is above plan, we're still aware of some of the factors from the integrated performance report. Our sickness levels are not where we confidently or would like them to be. We have still carrying a vacancy rate within there, which requires us to use bank and temporary staffing, and we've had industrial action, which we didn't plan for, which is you drawing on our temporary staffing resources. So something for us to note around that. From a trend perspective, we made so much progress early doors that actually, if you look at agency, for example, the bank was the lowest agency spend in 12 months. So we're still 0.9% below, as a percentage of pay bill, which against the national target of 3% is really good and should be commended. So we haven't got much to go at when it comes to agency spend. So there is positives within this, and I don't want to say there are excuses, but there are explanations for why we have some bank use. But the point stands that if we're going to live within our resources, we need to be paying attention to substantive bank agency and other aspects of temporary and premium spend, which is why we're really trying to focus on framing that within next year's cost improvement programmes and those thematics that we've mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne, Joe again.
Yeah, I just wanted to be really clear. I wasn't in my critique at all aiming at the achievement against these targets. It was really about that rich picture. And in fact, Suzanne picks up a really good point. Where we've done particularly well is that within there was trade information. That would partly explain why the next step is even harder. So it's really about providing the fullest possible picture so that all of that becomes evident without having to knit the picture together and really rich reports. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. That's really helpful. Thank you, Jeff. If you have a big plans on the release, or then perhaps you can feed into the update that we get aboard in that relevant way. Okay, lovely. Thank you. Anything else from colleagues? No, that's for us to note. We have to do that. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to Quality Committee and the reports again from the meeting held in December. Anything to add, Chris, from the...
No, I was just thinking, Chairman, I could speak for a long time about this report, but I think that's not what's required. Hopefully it says what it needs to say. The overview, I think, gives a picture that we get at the Quality Committee. We've discussed a number of the items here. What I would say is about the alerts there, they are all issues of concern. I don't think there's any of those which we wouldn't be concerned about. But I think through the Quality Committee discussions, we have understood what the action is being taken on. So I don't think there's an ask of the board, but it would be wrong not to draw attention to the fact that there are these ongoing things. So hopefully, the board gets a sense of the range of things that we discuss and hopefully get a sense that these are being tackled in an appropriate way in the context of the GGI recommendations as well, which will undoubtedly strengthen what we do.
Great, thank you for that. Thanks for that, Chris. I think, as you say, most of those we've talked about already in terms of the conversation so far. Owen.
Yeah, it was just to say, though, in terms of the mock service, because it's also in the audit committee report as well. I do think that we do maybe just as executive just need to really just take another look and ask ourselves the question: is our approach to it sufficient? Given its reoccurrence. So I just want to make that point.
That's right. So that's actually something which was discussed. There's a sort of location issue in this as well, I think, that when you start looking underneath some of the headline figures here, you start to come back to particular sites where there are patterns. So maybe that's something that's executive that we think might take into account.
I think that would be helpful, Owen, shining a light on that particularly, and perhaps its contribution to the NEBRA events as well, related, if there is any connection.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to make comments about lawsuits later in the audit committee, but I think it's just worth it since we raised it just to connect. So we do think lawsuits are an area of concern. The means there's a delegation issue as Chris raises, but there's also some issues related to how the action plans for trying to make improvements within lawsuits have been stitched together and overseen. So this piece of work that's happening, which I'll reference when we come to the audit committee, but just making sure that those are realistic and we look at timelines and deliverables that would shift the dial. With the start of our new director of clinical governance, there's been a renewed focus. And last week, our teams got together to look at this in it's an area that we are tackling, and we'll report in a bit more depth to the policy committee as we sort of all this. And I will go back to audit committee, which last time very short notice I wasn't able to attend, to discuss some of the action plans and timelines.
Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful. Chris, did you just turn it out? Okay, any other comments or questions? No, that's supposed to know. Thank you. So we've got a number of escalation points in the following the quality committee. We've already got the maternity census scheme, but we've also got the learning from deaths. So anything, again, we can assume it's been read, but is there anything you want to raise? Can I just make a general point about our papers as well, that if we've got, if we can avoid using acronyms, spell them out, kind of stuff sugar in the public domain, and it just doesn't always, you have to do a bit of thinking to remind yourself what that relates to. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of the learning from deaths, a couple of things to highlight. First of all, the format of the report is evolving a little bit. Post discussions at the committee. It's very happy to hear from colleagues and comments about how helpful or not helpful they found the changes and adaptations, so we can take into account. And absolutely take on board the acronyms and abbreviations bits and pay a little bit more attention to ensuring that that is correct and that is addressed in the future. Just want to point out, following conversation with an executive colleague, we looked at page 205, just wanted to provide additional clarity under the overview section, because I think colleagues have found this figure a little bit confusing. So the number of patient deaths in the reporting period, that says 1,566, and then it says number of deaths reviewed, 1,259, so colleagues were confused about how we get to 100%. So make it much clearer in the following report. But in short, that gap is the number of cases that we refer to the coroner for whatever reason, the criteria that we have from the coroner, which means that we do not do the reviews for those cases. So for clarity, we have reviewed 100% of the 1,259, and the balance is what has gone to the coroner. Appropriately, or later in the report, there's also a connection to not milestones and some of the detail, because one of our metrics that we're monitoring within NOC is change in mortality outcomes as a risk there. But that is all something that's inherent, and I've been disturbed a couple of times by clinical effectives having discussions specifically about this. To try and ensure that we have a unified approach across the organisation. And linking to one of the actions for the board, we've discussed in this forum a couple of times, Professor Mohammed coming to do some work with us. That is now happening on the 8th of April. We'll send out more information to colleagues. We agreed with him that he will do essentially an educational session for up to 100 of our colleagues, so it's like some of our leadership colleagues and that's colleagues, and would encourage colleagues from the board collectively, anyone who has an interest and would like to attend. I really encourage. It's really good, and also this is an area that would be helpful for board members to have at least helpful there.
Okay, thanks, Rafiq. Any questions or comments? Chris?
Two quick points. Firstly, again, this was something that we looked at in some detail at the Quality Committee with Peters. It does meet the requirements that we have for staff, but not statutory reporting to the board. So we're just clear that that's on the BFD, Prevention of Future Deaths report here, the thing that's drawn attention to is a system-wide issue in terms of thrombectomy and so on. Is that something that's now being progressed? Because I think it's sort of a system-wide risk that there's sort of left hanging a bit here. But I guess it would just be useful to close down the fact that that's being progressed and there have been some action or there's a next step on that one.
Yes. So in short, for kinds of other board members, this related to a patient who came to harm and died because in the Preston catchment area they did not have access to thrombectomy, and because as the Northwest we have an integrated system with 3 centres, the coroner saw fit to issue a prevention of future deaths notice to the 3 trusts and to NHS. And hence why it's a sort of connected system issue. Just to clarify that our service, apart from the fact that sometimes we have some lack of resilience in terms of our bike lane here, which we were addressing. But our service is 24/7 and is considered one of the most effective services nationwide. The regional issue is being addressed by two things. First, Preston have now a bit more resilience, and if they meet the target in February, they will go to 24/7, so that resolves that issue. And there have been parallel discussions about mutual aid and support across the three centres, so that's us and Walton in addition to Preston. Those have been, I think, discussions that have sometimes been tricky because I think everybody's worried about the resilience of services, but essentially come February it should not be an issue, and I'm in touch with the regional director for specialised provisioning about this, and there are ongoing discussions to ensure that we keep patients in the Northwest safe.
Okay, thank you. That is all helpful. Any other comments or questions? We have to accept the recommendations for related to this report. Yes, great. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, let's move on then to the nursing establishment report. Julia.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report as read, but just to remind colleagues while we're here, so we are required to receive a establishment review twice yearly, and this is that review. Obviously, we've had conversations, haven't we, about staffing, spend on staffing, use of temporary workforce. Actually, some of that is covered in here, and I'll ask Suzanne to comment on how we're managing the kind of financial element of this. But you'll see that we've 6 inpatient ward areas have completed the audit, and we are implementing 7 ward establishment changes. That's detailed in the report. Some of that's related to either an increase in acuity of patients, or increase in activity, or changes towards configuration. You'll note in here with what's included and what's excluded, and the work that we're doing on those areas that aren't included, including community nursing. And you're also seeing there where we're using other tools to assess the staffing requirements in there. So important features to note, please. So I think we're doing it in line with the requirements, but what we have to do as part of this is identify some variance in some of our areas in section 3.4. So where we've got the analysis of the safe nursing toolkit audit versus the professional judgment. So we need to do some work on improving the accessibility and liability of the audit. So we'll do some work there. It is important to know that professional judgment is an important feature of assessing levels. You can use audit tools, but actually the people close to the ward and department areas, because you need to take into account things like geography and things like that. So it is important to take note of professional judgment. So we've got the detail in there. I think we're going to come on to the Regulation 29 update, but in here we have identified those ward areas which the CQC did identify as having concerns with staffing levels, and those have been included in the review. So that's kind of triangulating that data in there. And then in the appendix, it's 7 areas where we're getting the board establishment changes. I think to note though, in the meantime, we are making adjustments as well. It's dependent on safety. Soft basis would be an example of that, where we've agreed to over-establishing soft basis. It's not part of this paper, but it's an important thing to know, because we've identified high sickness levels are driving issues with either safety or productivity. So it isn't just, we do this because we're required to do it to bring this to board, but then we've got a lot of activity going on, which wouldn't necessarily be reported to board, but just to show that is happening in the background.
Great, thank you for that. That's really helpful. So I've got a few colleagues now. So I have Aziz first, then Owen.
Thanks, Juliet. So the 7 wards that need an increase in nursing levels, and you've agreed with Suzanne through a redistribution of existing resources and budgets. You don't say whether any wards were above establishment levels, And I wondered, how many nurses are moving from other wards, and how much is allocation of budget? Does that mean some recruitment?
Sorry. Did you say that question? How many wards are over?
Are there any wards where there was above establishment level of nurses?
Yeah.
Because where are these extra nurses coming from that are going to move to these where there are below, or is it recruitment?
I think I put that in the
Yeah,
paper.
there is some reference to that in the report about where staffing levels, where some of the teams might have moved from to because of either acuity or changes in terms of the work that those areas were doing.
Sorry, I missed that. So there's no recruitment.
Sorry?
So there's no recruitment necessary.
No, there will be recruit. So this is about where redistributing the budget.
Yeah.
Not necessarily redistributing.
It's in 3.down as well, isn't it? So it mentions there about adjustments will be achieved through redistribution of existing resources and budget with no additional financial investment required. And then the appendix A is the summary of the changes. That helps at all. So
we're continually recruiting. So we do have vacancies. So we will be continually recruiting. We're not anticipating movement of staff from one place to the other. We'll be moving budget from one place to the other. Some of these deficits will be already. We will already be using temporary workforce. So not anticipating the movement of staff as such. Right. We do move staff around on a daily basis to cover shortfalls in vacancy or sickness levels. But I think the point I'm trying to make there is that there won't be there isn't a financial investment required.
Absolutely, and I understood that. I just wondered if there was a recruitment required on top of because of it.
We've got very low levels of vacancy of registered nurses. We've got a higher level of unregistered workforce, so we are recruiting it. You recall that we've got papers where our commitment to new recruited nurses we've committed that we're expecting. We're having colleagues join us in January actually from that. So,
okay, you okay with that, Aziz?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got a fee. Sorry, I missed you.
I'm sorry, that's.
It's another one. Okay. Owen.
So I think recognise the commitment to try and do this within existing resources in essence. I think we've just got to be very careful that we don't set that out as a rule. So I'd just like to know that there is a kind of an ongoing assessment of that, because there might be situations, regardless of our broader global fiscal position, where we have to say investment is required on that. And I personally think that something we took out from this conversation, that was just an ongoing expectation, whatever, without it being regularly tested as an assumption. The other bit I just want to pull out a little bit was around the data validity, and some of that linked to the impact it may then have on the quality of the audits themselves. So I absolutely hear the point about professional judgment and stuff. But again, I think it's just a question of, do we need to do anything, even if it's temporary fix, or looking at other ways of giving ourselves a bit more confidence about the audit data and the audit process?
I think what we've identified, so we do the audit, so I think what we're identifying is some of you conducting the audits at the time when we've gone back to look at the results, probably haven't completed the audit in a way that we would have expected them, despite them having training. Because when we put that in a kind of peer review or professional judgment situation, the audit data doesn't reflect what the professionals perceive that to be. So we're going back with first training there, but also the oversight of the data collection in order to get that. So it's not something that it's not unique to us where you see some variance in the way that people collect the audit data. So we need to put some more oversight in there. So there is quite a lot of peer review as well as part of that. So I think it is an ongoing piece of work around getting that data out. But I think it's important that it's the two factors that we're collecting the audit data, which shows us the kind of the number of patients, the acuity of the patients. So that's the audit data helps us to gather that. Then we look at that in professional judgment. Then you do the peer review, and we've identified that despite having to train the audit data isn't where we need to be. So we will keep doing that. But we'll be doing that in the background as well. So that on the data reliability, but it's a kind of a national conversation in nursing. How reliable are these audit tools? So I think they're under refinement of those conversations, and we've placed that in the 29A update as well. But we've been working with the regional team as well about how we can get greater reliability on us, determining what our nurse staffing level should be on the wards. Is easier when you get into areas like ED, community space, a little bit more difficult.
I think it's a helpful assurance. Actually, you've actually pulled out some issues when you go back to have a look in terms of those peer reviews. That the tools are just that, aren't they? They're helpful kind of baseline measures, but we can't just solely rely on those. So I think it's helpful that you're flagging there are other things to do. Suzanne, do you want to pick up the point about budget and resourcing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's probably the first conversation we had when we both joined the organisation about how do we make sure that we're connected on this piece of work, and in that starts a conversation about budget, about the resources to try to keep ourselves safe. So we incorporated that into our budget setting process, which is the Finance Performance Committee. Tomorrow, as part of that process, we'll be considering as an executive 2 elements. The first, which will be our exit limits, and where we're already spending resource to maintain safer staffing levels. And that talks to the point made earlier in the conversation about where we might need to recruit to reduce our temporary staffing reliance, because we're using the staffing already, but we need to make sure we use the right skilled staff and the right staff that we need. And the other part of that will be any additional resource that we might need to make, and that's come from care roles. That's come up the organisation, which will triangulate with the staffing establishment review piece. So we're considering both aspects. How do we make sure we're using substantive staff where we should, and do we need any additional to maintain the existing pressures?
Yeah, thank you. Julia?
Just as an example of that, I did refer to theatres where we're going to increase over-establishment because of the high levels of sickness absence, and we're doing the same with the reverse it between here under Regulation 29A. Will increase the workforce in trauma and orthopaedic nursing by about 10 full-time equivalents in order to get the configuration. And the conversation that we're having with our teams and we're monitoring closely together is that there would be an expectation over time that the spend on temporary workforce reduces. So there's a little bit of upfront investment to get us moving, and then over time we'd expect that temporary workforce spend to come down. So we'll track that. I think your point, Owen, that at the moment there is still enough temporary workforce spend where we feel that we can not increase the overall spend, but redistribute that spend and make sure the controls are in place. And the controls in place for use of temporary workforce are getting better. There's still some work to do there. And I think that's Joe's point. Still some work to do on those controls. But we're working very closely together.
Okay, thanks, Julia. I mean, I think that it kind of sets out the challenge that we've got, which is that we're asking you to be efficient and productive, and where services don't need additional staffing, that we move them to places where they are, and we need to reduce our headcount and our use of bank and agency, but we need to be safe, and that's the challenge, isn't it? And I think and we've got minimum expectations around reporting safe staff, use of safe staffing tools to the board, which is what the purpose of this is. But I've certainly been assured that there are lots of other things that are happening that will give us comfort rather than just relying on those basic expectations. And we know this is important because it's been flagged up in our CQC report. So we haven't been getting it right today. So we definitely need to do something more than it sounds like those things that you're addressing in the policies and Owen make it so relevant that, of course, we want to be efficient and move services to where it's required in terms of staffing levels. But we also need to make sure we've got the right resources to be able to cover those staffing levels using that professional judgment and being efficient. Tough job, but Appreciate that. Suzanne, did you still speak?
Yeah, so just on that point, I think it's given that we all recognise that it is our job to balance those two things, essentially maintaining safe, effective services that work for our patients and our colleagues while ensuring this efficiently, effectively in the financial climate. I think it's really important for us to recognise that the communication around that, we've probably been getting a little better, just connecting this bit of the discussion with some of the things that we've seen through the GGI, some of the feedback, where sometimes colleagues, when they're hearing this conversation, minds go to the financial sustainability and efficiency bit, rather than the other bit, and be more effective collectively, I think, as a board in conveying that this is getting the right balance on those two things is key, because otherwise it just creates obstacles to us achieving all this with our colleagues and the engagement again.
Agreed. Thank you. Good point to make. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so that's for us to know. We received the yearly staff and establishment, and we know the plans to improve the data for legislate and the update to the other tools that are used for reading and community. They're okay with that. Okay, I'm going to move swiftly on then to Regulation 29A update. Again, you can assume we've read if the report, if there's anything you want to highlight, Julia.
Just a couple of things, if I may. This is quite significant. It's quite significant, and we have received the draft report from the CQC for Salford Care Up, the Surgical Core Service Inspection of Salford. Just go through factual accuracy with that. Obviously we need to identify where we need to make improvements. That's around sufficient and suitably qualified staff to meet the needs of service users. Effectively, in that previous report, the uplift that we've done in relation to that refers to the bed reconfiguration, which is a piece of work which will enable patients. I'll give an example. Trauma-orthopedic patients who only got 2 wards as opposed to maybe the past 5 wards. We were in a GIRFT meeting yesterday around urology, and their patients are spread out into areas, too many areas. So there's the 2 things, isn't it? Making sure we've got the right number and making sure that we're not expecting them to have a level of skills which is really more or less impossible to have. So those 2 things are ongoing. We'd expect the bed to start to come into place in January. It's taken some time to get there actually. But it needs some additional investment to the workforce there. Just in terms of further actions identified, some of these are in progress and some of these are plans to go into place. One thing that I think is important is in section 4.3 where we've got this support of Helen Armstead, who is a previous inspector of CQC, and also is an experienced executive director. She's helping us build with the overall CQC action plan with a focus on the work that's going on at Salford Care Up, particularly in surgical core service. So that we put into kind of response to some of the questions earlier. We've got a lot of scrutiny onto there. Focus on this. That's very important, but also the wider overall picture. So all of the things that come from the Rochdale report, the Oldham report, and the Salford Salford report, plus all of the other areas where we might need to do some improvement. All of that is included in one kind of comprehensive plan. So I think the kind of I think we've talked about quite a bit of this. One thing that is important is we've asked the care org team, particularly the divisional team, to do a number of listening events over January to understand whether things are feeling for the staff on the ground. Because that protected me. CQC come back, they want to know that the staff on the ground feel that things have changed. So that's progress now. That'll be useful insight for us. But one thing I was going to say, the CQC will next ask us for any update on this after the end of January. We've got a meeting with the CQC, a face-to-face meeting with the CQC set up at the end of February, where Owen, the and I will be meeting with the CQC. We'll talk through some of the actions that we focused on here. But I'm not anticipating that we can get to the position that we might want us to be, nor the CQC would want us to be. It'll probably be 3 to 6 months that we get all this embedded. So I would not be providing you with assurance that we have met the regulatory requirements from this notice until between 3 and 6 months. Some actions are in place, but they're not embedded in somebody. But I don't want anyone to kind of think anything other than that. This is going to take some time. We would expect that. So that's the time frame that I'll be then working through. I'd like to be more specific between 3 to 6 months, but I need to see how embedded some of these actions are.
And 3 to 6 months from when?
No, from
now.
From now, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne? Oh no, sorry, Rafiq.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In-depth as a description of where we are, a lot of the progress in the report pertains to the actions that will be taken by our national colleagues. I just want to also extract that there are things that we need to tackle in our medical division that will be sit under medical services and the availability of medical cover and responsiveness medical cover, which was also touched on by CQC colleagues. And so I want to provide assurance that firstly we recognise that, and secondly, the action plan also takes care of that, which is being worked out, and we'll come back and also make sure that it connects to the timelines that you have described.
Okay, thank you for that. Chris?
I just really wanted to acknowledge the work that Juliet's done in drawing together, taking an overview of all the CQC and regulatory activity, which you gave us a very thorough report of the last quality committee on. I think for the first time I could see, certainly I could see all the CQC contacts and all the various other things and interventions and the timeline of when they were due to be addressed. So I think that it felt assuring to see that really, that we have that on all the different regulatory actions. Disappointing though it is to have any regulatory action, but nevertheless we have an overview.
Yes. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you, Chris. Any other comments or questions on section 29A and updates? Progress. Progress being made. Yeah. Thank you, Juliet. Okay, you can take a break for a little while. Let's move on to people and education. Aziz, anything to add on the update?
Not really. I just wanted to highlight that the recruitment team have done some absolutely fantastic work, and I think this congratulated some really amazing number of internal targets continue to be met or exceeded, such as time to hire, pre-employment checks. This is really important when you try to get people into a business with the amount of turn. I mean, I know our turnover is down, but our turnover is still massive, and so that's really brilliant. Also, not to underestimate the fantastic new learning hub. Those of us who well, all of us use it, but it used to take so much time to do stuff, and I think that is going to really change how staff feel when they have to do a bit of training, because it's so easy now, and I think that's really brilliant that we've moved to that at no cost, actually. And we heard from the Salford Care Organisation the work they're doing. Jo Fawkes and her team have real focus on sickness, and we were encouraging them to share the good work that they were doing with other care organisations. That's all.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that. It's good to see positive things in the alert section, which we don't always see. So thank you for that. And I agree. I think the learning hub, I mean, it's a perpetual challenge for people in the NHS, isn't it, to navigate mandatory training. So I imagine people would be really interested to learn from us actually around what we've done there, because it does make, and we can see it in the figures, can't we, around mandatory training. So yeah, great point to raise. Thank you. Owen and then Jeff.
Yeah, it's just in relation to the immigration rule changes, we've got some litigation planned. I'm just cognizant I've got a 3-hour session with trade union and overseas colleagues with a not too distant future. I just wondered where we were at in terms of communication of that with people who may be affected.
I'm happy to take that, Chair.
I'm looking in your direction.
Yeah. So we are fortunate in that the numbers affected, proxy to the size of our organisation, is very, very small. There are 2 colleagues immediately affected in the coming months about the changes from the immigration rules. We have done quite a lot of work. We've worked with our staff side colleagues, particularly our networks, and engaged with those colleagues directly. We've also done a piece of work to look at, because in terms of different visas, whilst we have 2 colleagues immediately affected who would not be eligible for a further extension to their current certificate of sponsorship, we've also done a piece of work looking particularly at graduates, so graduate trainees, etc., who are not currently sponsored by the organisation, but may potentially have moved into a role where they would look for sponsorship. The most common of that would be healthcare support workers. For us organisationally, there are 45 colleagues in that space. We know we've done an awful lot of work in terms of our widening participation, and Salford, as you'd expect, is the care organisation with the highest number of that 45. But it is also one of the areas where we work most effectively with our local community to recruit into. So whilst there may be 45 colleagues who would not be eligible for a switching visa, and we are written to them to make them aware of that as well, we are confident we wouldn't see a pressure in terms of a gap arising from this. There are other organisations, for example, in Greater Manchester, who have a significantly higher number of colleagues affected directly, sponsored by the organisation and through. We have done as much as we absolutely can in terms of supporting the colleagues, recognising that this is a change that was made nationally and one that we are required to follow.
Okay. Okay.
Same issue. Whilst the effect of the immigration changes on our sales were relatively limited, was any consideration given to the effect on adult social care and the potential knock-on effect of those in terms of discharge and therefore length of stay?
So when we've done the review of member staff, we've done the review of all of our employees, and that includes the adult social care. We have been working for a number of months prior to this with the changes that impacted on adult social care to try and reallocate.
In other providers, and that might impact on our length of stay, because if their workforce is affected in local authority,
right?
It's not just that.
I just took the question the wrong way. Apologies. It's a conversation that we are continuing across Greater Manchester, across the people and CPOs sphere, and we've had some discussion and we'll continue to do in the FLP.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? No, thank you, Aziz and Gertie. That's the vote. Let's move on then to research and innovation, Carmen.
So I want to, won't add too much here. There were no alerts to have some really good information about the number of recruits, and I say patients being recruited to research studies. Note that there has been a reduction in recruitment, but it's not just in our trust, it's nationally. So we are not an outlier, it's a trend that's happening. And we have paper later today about the future of the Research and Innovation Committee. There is a next meeting scheduled for next week, which I think we may have a challenge on being quorate on. Back to that, probably look at the paper later this afternoon. And I wasn't going to add anything else.
Okay, thanks, Carmen. Any questions? No. Good to note that. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, let's move on then to audit and risks. Tim.
Yeah, kind of the first one, which I think has been we talked to already. Really, we looked at overdue internal audit actions and insufficient information, particularly on who unlocks it, some medical job planning to approve those. But as that has then gone for the scrutiny that's been described at Quality Committee. In terms of other limited assurances, we had the relevant execs in the room to talk to us about data quality, the commissioning data set submissions, and provider contracting, which were limited assurances. Had an update on the data security protection toolkit, which was a generally positive picture, but clearly, Audit and Risk Committee, as we all know, cyber security remains a very high priority, and we remain focused upon that. Just looking at other points on the Assure, it's important for the board. Part of our duties each year in our work plan is to review the process related to fit and proper person, and we were content with the conclusions with regard to that paper. Deep dive we did into capacity, demand, productivity, and urgent care. The final one, probably worth noting for the board, is provision of external audit services. Given the kind of the market and also our experience with our incumbent provider, following sort of that discussion and understanding of that market, our recommendation is to the Council of Governors is to do a direct to our existing auditors, but that's a decision that goes to them.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Any questions or comments? I just had a question, and I just wonder what your thoughts are in terms of the alert around overdue internal audit actions. Are you getting the support that you need to make sure they're progressed and that people are showing up at meetings to kind of give that context?
I think so. I mean, there are going to be occasions when individuals cannot attend, but that's not a kind of a problematic issue. I think probably what that is showing us is there's a history that we've kind of talked about before, probably an eagerness to agree recommendations without probably sufficient executive oversight and working through whether we just accept these recommendations, because it comes down track that we then have the problem. Quality committee gets a blockage there, gets a blockage at audit and risk. So I think kind of execs are taking that away very positively and getting upstream, agreeing realistic, timely actions. So it's something we're putting pressure on each of the respective committees as those audit actions come through.
So just so I understand in terms of the process, where does that get discussed before it comes to audit and risk from an executive point of view in terms of internal audit, recs, urgency, culture? Where does that, Suzanne, is that something you can pick up?
So individually, obviously, whoever the responsible owners are, we start to bring it into our executive discussion as well, so that we can get an overview of not only where the internal audit planning up to in terms of the progress the audit's got, any outstanding action. So we're sort of using that space to make sure that we're connected on it.
Okay, that's helpful. Any other comments or questions? No. So again, that's for us to receive and the report from audit and risk. We have to do that. Okay, thank you. We're moving on then to the spine health patient safety and the report from the Green Oversight Group. So, the paper.
Thank you, Joe. So, very briefly, under the alerts, we put the spinal, a single patient, single point of contact, which has been a topic of discussion in the group for a while. Our nursing colleagues are focused on getting this resolved. Jeff will know that this is something that causes lots of frustration and discussion. Juliette, Katie, and the teams are putting something together just to ensure that essentially it fulfills what we needed to fulfill, because I won't speak for Juliette, so I'm sure she can comment, but there's just a bit of apprehension about the gaps in expectations actually give people in terms of what they think we can give them. So I wanted to bring that up to attention. The other thing that's worth noting is connecting it to the discussion, connecting the final issues to the discussion we've had around Regulation 29A, because one of the things that CQC colleagues raised in the sort of feedback was that when asked about aspects of change in action plans, they did not feel that some of our frontline colleagues were familiar with what was going on. So that's something we are taking on board, and had a bit of a sort of discussion and balancing as to how much colleagues will need to recognise the label versus the content of any changes. And generally, with this piece of work, we've had to, I think, go back a couple of times to review where we are, trying to understand whether we are achieving the changes we want to achieve with the plan that we have. And so we had a very helpful review put together, which I think we all agreed was what was needed, that's given some clarity, and also highlighted to us that the need for a working group in the background to push forward some of the changes that we felt haven't progressed as quickly as we would like. So that's now met, and we're expecting to see and support a revised plan in the March meeting. Final thing just to say, is to highlight that patient representative was not present at this meeting as noted in the advice, just because I think it's important to recognise how much we've tried to make that collaborative space between us and patient representatives, and I think we recognise that the depth and richness of the conversation is helped by that presence. So just to note that we take patient representatives to attend. I'll take it.
Okay, thank you for that. Any comments or questions? Do we have a sort of timescale for the action around the single point of contact? Because I know it's been on the radar for a while. Is there a sort of, are we working to a timescale around that?
We're working to a timescale. We're working on it at the moment. I think we're going to go back to the patient group and ask to try and clarify what exactly they meant by it. Because at times they've had a point of contact for various elements of the look back review, but it's about what would be required now. So I think we're just going to try and identify that. We would give a single point of contact as in a person. We've got to what bit of our organisation can we point them to? It's like it's within the patient experience, like the complaints team, patient experience team, just working through. We can't identify a person because people move around the roles, and we don't have a role specifically for that. So it's just
okay.
I think we only just picked that up following that last.
So just so I understand, is that so? This is a recommendation, if I understand it initially, and are we saying it's still not complete because we had feedback from patients or their families that that's not satisfactory for them?
Can I?
Yeah.
I put into the history because I think Juliet will be amplified, not having been the first bit of that discussion. This came out of discussions we had directly with the patient group, meeting with them, with the former chair about their experiences, what bits worked well and what bits didn't work well, and for us to sort of review and with that. One of the things that they felt did not work well was sometimes not knowing who to contact in the organisation. Excuse me. Essentially, to tackle issues related to our historical challenge. We did identify a single point of contact with doing a really good job. But I think there wasn't a lot of resilience there, and I think that connects with the comment that Juliet makes about is it a person, is it a role, etc. So this was something that we might add on to ensure that they had somebody to speak to, which wasn't a sustainable thing. So Katie and Juliet are now just reviewing that to ensure that there is that connectivity with either function, that there is clarity on where they need to go. And I think, again, I want to speak on Juliet's behalf. Just the main concern is in many of our conversations, there may be things that patients and families are expecting that we aren't fully clear that we can actually deliver. So it's just that clarity.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. Is any other comments or questions? Yeah.
It does need time. They're like, it must be soon. So if you're going on for so long, secondly, if we go back to the patient representatives and say one more time, we need you to tell us what you need. I think that's going to exacerbate the ongoing populations from look at to make that thing. Patient representatives have done such brilliant work on it that didn't do it last meeting. So I simply say we need to not do that. Not the most complex request or anything. I think we need to make an offer, go back and see whether our offer is acceptable or not, rather than us. No, thank you.
Julia, is that something we can do to sort of switch it around? So rather than asking again for something and then say, is that acceptable?
Yeah, well, I think we know what the offer will be.
Yeah.
I think we just need to kind of work through with them what that offer looks like.
Okay.
But I don't think it's perhaps what it's a difficult one. I don't think we can offer an individual person. It's going to have to be rolled through that team. I think just get to that point. I think this point is fair, but the points of this, they have had a single point of contact specifically around the interacting with the organisation for the piece of work that we're doing, which is a look review. It's what would be required from now on. Yeah, okay. I suppose the kind of more or less there. We just need to have that conversation.
Yeah. I think it's we need to close this action down. That's I think the gist of the conversation. Okay, thank you. So that's for us to receive and acknowledge the update for. Oh, sorry.
So sorry, Chair, just on that. So, are we going to get this closed down by the next board meeting? I'm this between myself and you. It's not going to be better. I could have this as an idea.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's take that away in action. Okay. So let's move on then to the governance section. So we've got a couple of things under here. We've got the board assurance framework initially. Tim, is there anything to add on the board assurance framework?
So colleagues to take the report of red note in the vast majority of the scrutiny around the risk is undertaken through board committees. There's a read across obviously to item 9 and the work that Juliet and Andrew described, where improving some of our risk processes, and that includes board assurance framework, particularly work around our risk appetite, will be embedded in programme work over the course of 44 to get us to a position in May when we have our opening back for 26-27.
Okay. Questions and comments for Rafiq? We still. Oh. Okay, Owen.
Yeah, just a couple of points. I think first of all, the digital system sustainability risk really highlights what I think has been an underlying theme across several things that the audit committee report, the GTI work, thing about the digital resilience part and the impact that digital is having in one way, shape or form. And I guess I'm just flagging that I think when we get on to maybe later discussions about financial sustainability, whilst quite likely we have a head about affordability and efficiency, I do think we do have to be having a thought process about what areas, regardless of certain, just might need further investment or not further reduction. And I think the area of digital, and particularly when I think about digital system sustainability, just what I wanted to flag by virtue of the fact that I think we need to have consideration on. So that's one point. And then just the other point, I just think, even though we talked about maternity services earlier, I think, often when we look at what insurance frameworks, they stay the same for a long time. I just think it is worth identifying or recognising the maternity shift, even though we talked about that. As I was saying, the lifetime of a bath, it's not often you see some movement. So I thought to make those 2 points, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, any other comments or questions? Chris?
Just pick you up on that, Emma. I was looking at maternity risk and thinking, what's gone down is the likelihood But the impact, I think, we've all stayed to final. But I think what's gone down is the item up to 2. And I was thinking how much further we could go, to be honest. I'm not sure there's a lot further you can go on that. So maybe the target is not the right one. Maybe we have to stay at the target.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Colleagues, so that's for us to approve the budget framework, which concludes in 2025 December, and note commencing work in Waterford to strengthen the assurance framework. We have with those recommendations. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so changes to boards and subcommittees. Tim, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so Carmen's already alluded to this. So the paper sets out a proposition to disestablish the Research and Innovation Committee and redistribute some of its functions across the organisation. Again, was looking across to some of the discussions we've already had around reviewing, revising, strengthening elements of our governance, which will take forward through research people. Oh, sorry, Audit and Risk Committee in the first instance.
Okay, colleagues, any questions or comments on this? Jeff?
Jeff has asked about the section in paragraph 3, risk, health and qualities. This risk isn't that this will be everybody duties responsibility. So when it comes here, what form will that take? Because there isn't 24 isn't, and who, in terms of executive responsibilities, will bring whatever that form is. Will it be the consultant public health, or will it be an executive director? Whilst I'm on the subject, let me make the same point about the 4 committees partnership. Considering the creation from the committee set, we can now start coming to this board rather than the committee. Again, in what form? Will it be simply get the minutes, the reasons you want, and will an executive responsibility important to us on the strength and operation of our partnership with the parties?
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Tim,
yeah,
respond to that?
Yeah, I'll respond to those please. We'll take the last point. I think we previously got papers around all localities partnership 2 board, and that would continue. I think Gertie on the exec lead for that. In response to the piece around health and qualities, I think in part the answer to some of that lies in the discussion that I want to have toward the Risk Committee around what our governance looks like. I believe simply having a committee just to look at it misses the point. We need to take steps to try and embed it through our governance, through our data and across the organisation. That will take time for us to get right. I think we've all got a responsibility around the table to get to a point where health and qualities is embedded through our governance and through our discussions.
Okay, I think the points well made, and part of this is also about how our governance structure all fits together, which is the framework that you're talking about, which you just mentioned. So I think that'll be helpful to see it in that sense. I think because there will be things that will be highlighted as we haven't got a place for them, or we're not. It's not feeding through into the beginning the same way. So let's take that away and have a look at that. I don't think it's a reason for even research and innovation on the back of those things, but I think they're really good points well made. We don't want to miss or lose sight of them. And I think the other thing that's probably worth saying in a similar vein is that this is in no way, shape or form saying that we don't value research, because that's absolutely critical to our future. And actually we're doing a lot of great stuff, and I don't know if any colleagues around the table ever read the newsletter that comes out around research. It's great, gives a real good flavour. But actually, I think what we're doing here is strengthening that in terms of having direct route into the executive colleagues to make sure that's championed. And of course, I think, and this would be an ask perhaps for a feed to pick up, perhaps, is that encourage. Let us know when there are opportunities for us to participate in presentations, opportunities to hear more about the research from a non-exec perspective, because we don't always hear about those things. If we could get those in advance, that would be great, because we really, I think, are interested in that. And I think when I've certainly been to research and innovation in the past, there's been a lot of interest when presentations have taken place. Right. Okay, I've got Rachel and then Chris.
Mine is just around, to your point around the communication with the likes of, our consultant in population health and also our leads around research is, whether or not the non-execs on the board can help with some of that communication and have the discussion with those individuals about the reason and just to support the content of this paper so that they do understand it's more around governance rather than interest and to really show the path that they're going to take in the future. Then I'd be very happy to help and support with those discussions as well.
Tim, did you want to come back on that one?
Yeah, just for colleague benefit. So the two, Steve and Phil from Research and Innovation, have been supporting me draft this paper, so they're well aware of it. I met with Steve at 8 o'clock this morning. The intention of that is for Steve and Phil to describe what they want to help them, as opposed to this group of people assuming what we think that looks like. Likewise, by a similar conversation with Christy, and I'm meeting her tomorrow to follow that forward, to take that forward.
Thank you. Carmen?
So thank you for raising that question, Rachel, because that was on our mind, and it's good to hear that you're doing that going forward. If the decision is taken that we go ahead with this proposal, then can we make a decision about items that were scheduled to be seen at next week's meeting, and that they don't get lost, people are prepared for them, and they're important, and that they go somewhere in a short time rather than a long time. For example, the Jeffrey Jefferson Brain Research Centre, the annual due to come next week. It was fantastic last year to see all of the work that's being done there, and I wouldn't want that to be lost. So that's an ask from me.
Okay, thank you. Tim,
Yeah, I'll take an action to review the work plan for Carmen, and I'll come back to you in terms of where we've got to redistribute them.
are we standing down at the next meeting then? Is that the plan? Yeah.
We are
Assuming
forward,
that
I understand anyway.
Are we? Oh, okay. I thought that was going ahead.
So from this a note this morning from Bronwyn, it looks like execs are have a conflict in their diaries. So we're quorate on NEDs, but we're not quorate on execs, and that's a question.
It's just, I mean, when people have been preparing reports for a meeting in a week's time and we drop them, I think that's really disrespectful, actually. And I was planning to come to that meeting and make time for it.
Okay, let's pick that up outside. I was just asking a practical question. I didn't realise there were some other implications to it. So we haven't made the decision yet. So
but just is there not some other exec that could come? I mean, it would be a real shame to just suddenly drop it a week before to these people who will be feeling perhaps a bit sensitive that it's being dropped as a board anyway. I just feels a bit unkind, doesn't it?
Sure. Let's pick that up. Okay, that's my list. So, Julia.
I think the research element of this will be picked up jointly by Rafik and I think my understanding of it is that the leadership were happy with that decision. So notwithstanding standing the meeting down, I agree, but actually I think the decision about where that should report into and the oversight of it, I think has been welcomed by those colleagues. I think it's important to.
Thank you. That's good. Anything else? Anybody else?
It's a very practical thing, but in the communication on research, it's a little bit counterintuitive, isn't it? There's a time when I'm sure Owen is receiving instructions that the board must see more about clinical trials numbers, because there has been a communication etc. that they're doing this. I think we just need to be careful about make sure that we hesitate to say through the IPR that discussion, but somehow or other we make sure that we are continuing to be cited on those specific metrics that we have to set up times and so on that are being nationally promoted that we should do those. So very tactical thing.
No, good point. Thank you for raising it. Okay. Any other comments or questions? No. Okay. So we are noting the establishment. Sorry, no, on the wrong agenda item. So we are approving the disestablishment of the Research and Innovation Committee and the redistribution of functions in line with the proposal set out in paper, and note the approved updates that we've incorporated into that governance framework that I illustrated. We're happy with those two items of check framework. So improvement board terms of reference or ratification. Anything you want to just say?
Yeah, good to take it as read and notes. Is there any questions around the recommendations?
Okay, any questions from colleagues? Chris, put your mic on still. Are you
Sorry.
contributing to the debate or
No.
following something up?
Juliet's putting me right.
Any comments or questions? Seems straightforward. I think it addresses some of the questions we were raising earlier around where some of these things might go and have some oversight of. So I thought it was quite helpful. Are we happy with that as a proposal in terms of reference? Tim?
Oh, yeah, I just have one. I mean, I'm just interested in what the National Oversight Framework seems to cover everything anyway. So we do need to just patrol the borders of what this committee does, because it could become everything. I mean, what's not in the National Oversight Framework? It's pretty much covered. So I'm kind of just worried we don't by default create an executive committee that's kind of doing everything.
Yep, no, good point. That what did cross my mind fleetingly for a second. Rafiq, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so my view, Tim, if helpful from the board here, there's two things that you need to keep in mind. First of all, we have a proven approach with Change Before Your Board that has shown that we can have a much better grip on what we're doing as an organisation, which we feel really is also becoming helpful in the focus on the quality space. That's always been one of our aspirations. And the other thing is, if we look at the law, there's a lot that isn't in there. Actually, it's a handful of metrics, and colleagues can have all sorts of views as to are they the right ones, is this the way to do it? But ultimately, it's a set of focused metrics that are a subset of the wider work that we do. And so organizationally, and to sort of discuss and consider, I think this has come from a feeling that we should be absolutely giving laser focus to those because of the national standing that it reflects. And also, I heard a lot from colleagues when our rankings came out about how they self-perceive themselves. So I think focusing on those in this way, my view, I would posit, is a very reasonable thing for us to do. But the metrics in the law are a small subset of the kind of things that we would be looking at, for example, for other committees and quality, etc.
Yeah, it kind of touches on, there's not an answer now, but it touches on that question of EGI and this exec-led change portfolio, an exec-led risk management group, an exec-led research and innovation group. So that it's kind of just working out. There could be leakage between them, and one could suddenly kind of suck up everything, and you're running. So it's kind of probably for the chair. Well, it's largely Owen. That's another point. Kind of, are you content with your capacity and how you're held to account and how you hold others to account? That you're chairing some of the big groups that are driving the business of the organisation. So it's kind of put that in not for solving now, but when we look at those groups, I kind of think it's something we need to bear in mind.
Okay, I know Suzanne wants to come in and no one wants to respond to that. I think it raises a point that I was just mulling over about capacity for you in chairing that committee, but it's a good point about that sort of oversight. I mean, ultimately it feeds into the board anyway, doesn't it? So, but let's take Suzanne, and then I'll leave you to respond to all of the points at the end, because I think there's another people as well. So Suzanne.
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues may recall a good few months ago we had a conversation about the improvement board and the NOF plan. and we had some table conversations about the difference with this is specificity. And we said we're not going to try and do everything. We're going to, as we say, laser focus on a number of small things that we're going to do really well and assess the extent to which they should the dials on and off. That doesn't mean there's lots of other things happening outside the organisation as well, but the key for this one, which is different, is that there is a specificity. Never say the word, and I say it all the time, about what sits beneath that. And there's crossover as well across those domains as well. So it is a different approach to some of the other governance meetings that we take. And I think we're having some different conversations that are coming out of it, and we're holding ourselves to account about completing pieces of work and then assessing their impact rather than the same kind of boil the ocean to come to every tweet.
Yeah, I can see that, but when you look at the structure, it's got the whole piece. It's not just length of stay, theatre productivity, sickness. It's kind of
The structure's the national one, isn't it?
yeah. So I just think we just need all of us to kind of guard where we're not discussing everything everywhere, put everything in one place. You know, so.
Yeah, no, point that well made. I'm just conscious of time, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, just to observe on Tim's point, I would see it very much in terms of in any organisation. One of my first questions is, in my kind of role, so how are you going to manage change and how do you manage core business? And that's how I see these two instances, the change portfolio board and the improvement. One is to manage major change, and actually the exemplar that the NCA has created there, with Owen in the chair, is I've not experienced a change board be so consistent and strict about its focus as the one at NCA, because you'll recognise that scope as being broadly the same for 2 years now. So the focus has been really tight, and there are criteria that PwC colleagues will help us establish. And so you've got to get through those criteria for anything to get into the change portfolio board. I think equally, if the improvement board stays with the focus that's expressed here, then those are the guardrails. It's the behaviours around keeping that discipline that which look to be in place.
Thank you for that. Chris?
Sorry, no.
Oh, right.
Change my mind.
Oh, yeah.
So just a few things in terms of the NOF and what it focuses on. What it doesn't do at the moment, for example, is have a meaningful focus on health inequalities. I think part of what Tim's talked about, Tim, I think Tim here, we've already had some talk about how we can make sure that health inequalities does play a part in it. But again, as an example of it, a thing that misses currently, that would be another. The work I would say in terms of prevention, I'm going to curse myself and say I use the word less shift, assuming that not everybody understands that, and that's particularly if it's a public audience might not understand less shift. But for those of us in here, we know that there's a piece of work we're doing that again sits outside of this improvement board, and I think the board is quite committed to doing work on that. I think the other thing, and again, it's just reinforcing Suzanne's point, but with an example. So if you take, for example, sickness absence, which is a thing that but at the moment we're focusing particularly on welcome back to work reviews. But there's a whole host of other things that sit outside of sickness absence that will sit, for example, in the People and Education Committee. So I think it might be more about let's do that piece of work just so that you can see, and the non-executive colleagues can see actually all the stuff that sits out of it, because as Suzanne has said, the commitment in this particular improvement board was to be very, very focused, which links back to Joe's point about the change portfolio board. It's really trying to adopt that approach where you're not trying to boil the soup. You are trying to be quite specific in terms of what we do, but it might be just useful in each of these examples, because one of the conversations we keep having in the improvement board is resisting it growing legs, where people, think, well, we should be covering this and shouldn't be covering that, and we're saying actually no, we want to stay quite disciplined. In terms of the capacity point, I think that is a conversation that needs to be had, because it doesn't feel intuitively right for me that in a £2 billion organisation, chief executive is chairing the scope of committees and things, whether they are NED-led activities or whether they are executive-led activities. It feels to me like that is a lot of committees that you're asking somebody to chair. Now, you know, it's not that type of doing stuff out of the job, but I'm just, you know, that's the, based on my previous experiences of being a chief executive, that's a lot of things where I am chairing front and centre, and anybody who knows, because you're all chairs, some of you, what is required to make sure that you are an effective chair on a piece of business, it does take time and capacity. So I think it's a genuine point to raise. I'm happy to shut myself into it, but we also need to be very, very clear about what then potentially doesn't get done. You might reasonably expect from a chief executive, and I think this goes back to the Good Governance Institute and what Andrew was describing as that upper right quadrant. You asked the question then about the strategic forward-looking stuff. Where is the emphasis and focus on that going forward? So I just give that as a view at this moment in time, but something will come back to check.
Okay, so I think if we can agree that we're going to establish the improvement books, I think that's general agreement around the table, and the broad terms of reference, but with a caveat that we might change the chair at some point if that's required in terms of capacity. Everybody comfortable with that? Okay, thank you. Okay, register CO documents. Oh, no, sorry, I've missed nominations and remuneration committee terms of reference for ratification. So these have been to the NRC. They're here at the board for ratification. Anybody got any questions? So,
just about in the terms of reference that have been appended to the document, there's an erroneous sentence which I need to remove before I include them in the governance framework manual at 4.12. It should have ended. At and terms of service. The rest of the sentence is superfluous. Needs to move in as agreed at NRC.
okay, everybody comfortable with that? Yeah, okay, thank you. And then the registered seal documents.
To know.
Happy to note that. Use of the seal, thank you. Okay, and okay, Chair's report from the Council of Governors. Again, I'll take that as read. Anybody got any questions? No, that's good to know. And then I haven't got any other business unless anybody tells me so now. Okay, so I'm going to bring the meeting to a close and exclude the press and public from the meeting at this point on the grounds that publicity of matters being reviewed will be prejudicial to public interest by reason of confidential nature of business. We haven't got any press or public, so we're not asking anything to leave at this point. So I'm going to close the meeting at 13:21.